Hey guys, tonight we begin a quiet stroll through gaslit London with our humble Victorian lamplighter. Picture the clang of the oil can, the hiss of escaping gas, and a warm glow unfurling over damp cobblestones. If you love slow history and gentle ASMR moments, please like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy the content. Share your location and local time in the comments so we can build a cozy global community. Now is the time to dim the lights, switch on a soft fan, and settle in for a relaxing journey. Listen for distant church bells and feel the rhythm of each soft footfall. In just a moment, we'll tiptoe into the lamp house, inspect leather tins and cotton wicks, and map our nightly route. Warmth and wonder await just beyond that first flicker of flame. Now the story begins. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and focus on the tale. Soon you will drift into restful slumber. The screen now fades to darkness. Before the first pale fingers of dawn could reach the narrow windows of the lamp house, the lamplighter stood in silence beneath the vaulted timber beams. The night's hush still lingered in the heavy air, broken only by the faint drip of condensation sliding down iron piping and the gentle scuff of woolen sleeves against rough timber. He pressed his palm against the aged wooden door, its surface worn smooth by decades of nightly comings and goings, and eased it inward. A soft creak echoed through the chamber, as though the lamp house itself stretched its limbs after hours of darkness. The world outside remained asleep, and here, in this lantern-lit sanctuary, time hovered between one day's labors and the next. Inside, rows of unlit gas lamps stood at rigid attention upon their iron racks, their glass chimneys clouded with the soot of countless nights. Each lamp, though presently inert, bore the promise of a quiet vigil over London's streets. The lamplighter paused in the threshold, inhaling deeply. The musty scent of aged oak beams mingled with the sharper tang of trace gas and the faint sweetness of residual camphene oil. In the dim glow of a single lantern left burning through the hours, shadows danced across brick walls, revealing the feathered patterns where soot had settled and the curving shapes of wrought iron pegs from which the lamps would soon be dressed. Stepping further inside, he removed his woolen cap and shook out strands of damp hair. The temperature here felt cooler than the night beyond, as if the lamp house were a deep cellar cold from long neglect. He reached up to the first row of pegs, his gloved fingers brushing against brass hooks that held leather oil tins and handheld lantern frames. Each tin was a companion of sorts, dented in places and burnished smooth by the touch of countless hands. One by one he unhooked them and set them upon a long, scarred workbench. The tin screw caps glinted even in the low lamplight, each lit a promise of fuel that would soon fill the glass reservoirs high above the cobblestones. As he worked, his ears caught the distant cries of gulls drifting over the Thames. Even before sunrise, the birds had begun their calls, a hollow, mournful sound that reminded him of the river's winding course through the heart of the city. For a moment, he leaned his head against the cool brick wall and closed his eyes, letting the gulls' lament mingle with the dripping of moisture from the rafters above. The cries faded into quiet once more, leaving only the hushed breathing of the lamp house and the soft tick of an old clock suspended near the ceiling. Retrieving a clean, soft cloth from the folds of his waxed canvas apron, he approached the first darkened lamp. The chimney glass was dotted with beads of overnight dew where the warm interior air met cooler mornings. He lifted the cloth and, with a slow, deliberate motion, wiped the glass until it gleamed translucently. The cloth absorbed a faint smear of soot and moisture, leaving behind a streak of brightness that seemed to promise the lamp's future glow. He repeated the gesture on the next lamp, and then the next, until all the front row, 12 lamps in total, stood clear of haze and ready for the night's forthcoming ritual. Between each motion, he paused to steady his breathing, observing the workshop's quiet order. Counters lined with neatly stacked cotton wicks awaited their turn in the weeks ahead. Brass oil containers lay in patient rows, each polished face reflecting the lantern's golden flame. Behind him, a substantial parchment map of London's streets hung on the wall, its edges curling with age. Upon this map, small charcoal crosses marked the lampstands the city expected him to kindle. Very soon he would set out along those twisting roads beneath that same dim glow. For now, however, the morning stillness reigned supreme. He let his fingers linger on the cold metal of a lantern frame, as though to reassure himself that this tranquil moment was real. The metal bore tiny scratches from former scorches, and one of the glass panes had a hairline crack patched with a thin strip of wire. Even in slumber, the lamp house preserved the memory of earlier struggles against wind and frost, of lamps extinguished by sudden gales, and of the lamplighter's own steadfast hand relighting them. A quiet pride settled in his chest, pride not of spectacle but of continuity, of an unbroken dance between flame and darkness that stretched back through decades. He walked to the far corner of the room, where a small wooden barrel held fresh cotton wicks. The barrel's lid had been left slightly ajar the night before, and the cool scent of undyed fiber rose as he lifted it fully. He took a single wick in his hand and let its softness run across his palm. Later that morning he would examine each wick in detail, sniffing the oil for purity, trimming stray strands here and there, yet for now he simply admired the simple potential of the cotton, how it would soon draw the camphine blend into its core, feeding a clean and steady flame. A hush fell so complete that he could hear the faint rustle of his own clothing. Beyond the lamp house walls, a carriage passed on the Thames embankment, its iron wheels clattering once before receding into distance. The lamplighter lifted his head, catching the echo of that lonely sound in his memory. It felt as though London itself were stirring, yawning as it prepared for another busy day. But here, in the amber glow of one lone lantern, time remained suspended at the threshold between yesterday's end and tomorrow's beginning. He moved to a small shelf beside the door and retrieved a bound notebook, its leather cover long since softened by frequent use. Inside were penciled entries of lampstand numbers, oil quantities consumed, and notes on any burns that had sputtered low or chimneys that required extra cleaning. Flipping to an empty page, he traced a line with a quill, recording today's date in careful script, and then paused. For a moment he simply listened, to the slow drip, the distant gulls and the soft beat of his own heart. In this stillness, he found both a moment's refuge and the grounding certainty that soon, the lamplighter's nocturnal pilgrimage would begin anew. At last, with the dew wiped from every pane, the tins unhooked and neatly aligned, and the wicks gathered in readiness, he laid aside the notebook. He stepped back into the center of the lamp house, lifting his eyes to the dark rooftops visible through the low windows. In half an hour he would move on to the next stage of the day, inspecting each oil container and ensuring the purity of his camphine blend. But for now, the morning hush held him calm and composed, aware that these few quiet moments signified the threshold of an endless ritual. Each evening he would return here, brush away fresh soot, refill reservoirs, and repeat the choreography that shaped London's gentle glow. He straightened the lantern on its iron hook, releasing a final spiral of warm light into the shadowed room, and touched his cap to its flickering flame. Then, with soft footsteps, he closed the lamp house door behind him and stepped into the pre-dawn chill, the world already humming softly with anticipation of the day to come. The first lantern's glow trembles across the workbench as you step forward, leaving behind the misty quiet of the lamp house's central hall. The soft click of your boots on the worn wooden floor echoes faintly, mingling with the distant calls of gulls drifting in from the Thames. On the bench before you lie the leather-strapped tins, brass caps catching the feeble lamplight in softly gleaming arcs. In this hushed half-light, you prepare for the ritual that will carry you from pre-dawn stillness into the silent hours before evening. Each instrument must be tended, each wick tested, so that when night falls upon London streets, no single lamp will falter. You settle onto the low wooden stool, the rough grain pressing through the layers of your woolen trousers. With a steady hand you reach for the first brass oil container. Your fingers trace the cool curve of its body, feeling the slight ridges where the maker's name is looped in copperplate script. There is a small thump as you set it upright, then a quiet twist as the cap comes free. A thin wisp of vapor drifts upward, sharp, resinous, and faintly sweet. You inhale gently, the scent of camphine oil mingling with the distant salt-edged air. Each sniff is a promise that this oil will flow with clarity, sustain the flame without choking on impurities. If the aroma is off, if it carries any hint of rancid tang, you replace the container with one fresh from the stores. Beside you, a length of soft cotton wick waits on a long narrow board. Under the flickering lantern, the fibers appear almost ethereal, pale strands gently twisting in the glow. You lift a single wick strand between thumb and forefinger, flexing it to test its resilience. A good wick yields slightly, springs back, ready to draw oil upward by capillary action. Any brittle edge, any faint suggestion of crumbling, and you set it aside. Those flawed wicks go into the small ash bucket at your side, where they will be burned clean, their fragments return to dust. There is a solemn satisfaction in discarding the unfit. This quiet disposal ensures that every lamp you tend will feed on perfection rather than falter and sputter in the dark. You move methodically down the line of new cotton, placing each chosen wick in neat parallel rows on the board. The lantern overhead sways ever so slightly, sending playful shadows dancing across the soft white fibers. The wick board is your altar for the night, the place where rough material becomes promise. Handfuls of cotton transformed into the slender hearts of hundreds of lamps. When you have laid out enough for the first half of your route, you pause to straighten each strand, aligning them by length and loft. The result is almost meditative, a quiet symmetry of bright threads ready to be trimmed, tested, and seated in the burners that will one day glow at each street corner. With the wick laying complete, you turn back to the brass tins. One by one, you retrieve a leather-reinforced container from its wrought iron hook on the pegboard. The leather flap creaks softly as you open it, and the can inside slips out with a muted clink. A square of oiled canvas cloth rests atop the can. You unfold it and begin to polish the metal surface in slow, patient circles. The rag moves in gentle sweeps, erasing tiny smudges of soot or fingerprints left by yesterday's work. Here and there, the brass reflects the lantern's light like a quiet signal, an assurance that when you close the lid later, no unwanted air or moisture will compromise the oil within. Every now and then you pause to examine the leather casing itself. The straps and buckles are solid but show the slightest traces of wear, tiny creases at the joints, a faint crack along one edge of the securing strap. With a drop of leather conditioner applied on your fingertip, you rub the surface, coaxing suppleness back into the hide. The aroma of dressing leather, a mixture of wax and tallow, blends seamlessly with the sharper scent of camphene. It is the fragrance of preparation, of tools made ready for their nightly service. When the leather gleams softly, when the tins sit snugly in their holsters without a hint of slack, you know this part of the ritual is complete. A quiet rustling sound alerts you to the next step, trimming wicks to perfect length. You select a pair of fine-pointed scissors and lift the first strand of cotton. The blade parts the fibers with a clean snip, yielding a wick precisely 6 inches long, no more no less. Length matters, for too short and the flame wavers, too long and the lamp smokes, leaving soot to mark the glass chimney. Each cut is made with deliberate care, the scissors closed and reopened in a brief, satisfying motion. As you trim each wick in turn, you line them up on a second board, fingers brushing stray threads away until a neat array of ready wicks stands before you. With the wicks now trimmed, you return to the tins one last time. The brass lids are tightened until they click softly, sealing each vessel. You rest each tin upright, then give it a gentle turn to listen for the faint murmur of a perfect seal. No hiss escapes, no faint glimmer of candlelight flickers from within. They are locked, loaded, and prepared. Below, the trays on the bench are emptied of old wicks, ashes swept aside in a brief whoosh of air. The bench itself feels astonishingly clean, so clean that a single errant fiber or droplet of oil would stand out like an errant star in a midnight sky. Standing back, you survey your work under the gentle flicker of the lantern. In this moment, the lamp house feels timeless, as though the walls have borne witness to the same routine for generations. The leather tins shine in orderly rows. The wicks, trimmed and aligned, await their destiny. In the muted silence, you can almost sense the night just beyond the walls, stretching forth its dark tapestry across London's rooftops and alleys. Soon you will don your waxed canvas apron, secure the oil cans at your side, and step out into the gathering dusk. But for now, the ritual of inspection is complete. You allow yourself a moment to close your eyes and breathe deeply of the mingled scents: waxed canvas, camphene, cured leather, warm brass. Each inhale is a renewal of purpose. You think of the first lamp you will light, its gentle hiss, the bloom of glow on damp stone, the transformation of a silent thoroughfare into a path of soft, golden illumination. This simple act, repeated dozens of times over, shapes the night itself. With the tins sealed and the wicks perfected, you are ready to carry that light into London's heart. In the hush of the lamp house, you gather your tools, placing each tin in its leather holster and guiding each tray of wicks onto the cart that awaits beyond the workbench. The lantern's flicker seems to bow in farewell as you step toward the door, prepared to meet the soft hush of empty streets. And so, with every instrument tested and every wick prepared, Chapter 2 draws to its close. a careful, deliberate pause before the lamplighter's silent pilgrimage through the deepening twilight. The benches stand tidy, the tins gleam, and the wicks lie in patient readiness. Tonight, every detail has been tended. No failure will mar the steady glow you carry across London's silent lanes. A soft hush has fallen across the lamp house. The high, arched ceiling seems to drink in every footstep, muffling it until it becomes a distant echo. By now, the morning's pale light from the small windows has receded into a uniform gray, and the flicker of a single lantern on the workbench casts dancing shadows on the rough-hewn walls. Here, at this mid-morning hour, the lamplighter stands before a row of wooden ladders, each bearing the stains and scars of nights spent ascending iron posts beneath London's gaslit sky. Today these ladders will not bear him upward. Instead they must be cleansed, smoothed, and readied for his next round. He begins with the tallest ladder, a sturdy six-rung frame whose beams are darkened by years of clambering and occasional contact with sooty chimneys. The lamplighter lifts it carefully, settling its base into a clean corner of the workshop, and leans it against the wall. The wood feels cool and slightly rough to the touch. Here and there tiny chips reveal pale sapwood beneath the surface. He runs a hand along one rail, noticing the fine grit of dirt and black residue that clings to every crevice. Then he reaches for the wire brush, its bristles gleaming steel in the soft light. With measured strokes he pushes the wire brush along the iron rungs, starting at the topmost bar. A faint metallic rasp echoes in the vaulted space. Each pass of the brush dislodges a layer of rust and grime. Tiny flecks of iron dust drift downward like dark motes in a sunbeam, settling onto the wooden floorboards. The lamplighter shifts the ladder slightly to reach a stubborn patch of corrosion near the middle rung, where years of rainwater and gas soot have fused into a crust. He pulls the bristles more firmly across the surface, listening to the higher-pitched squeal as metal meets metal. A minute later, the rung gleams faintly silver where the old coating has given way. Satisfied, he moves to the next rung, pausing between each motion to examine the progress. The tool in his hand feels balanced and familiar, its wooden handle smooth from countless nights of this same ritual. He works steadily, engrossed in the simple choreography: brush, lift, tap, shift position. The silence of the chamber amplifies every sound. His breath, measured and calm, rises in soft puffs, and the distant hum of city life remains just out of earshot, like a half-remembered lullaby. Once the metal rungs are free of rust, he turns his attention to the ladder's wooden beams. With a piece of coarse burlap cloth and a small pail of warm water, he wets the rag until it is damp but not dripping, then wipes along each length of wood. The water dissolves the clingy layer of dust, which darkens the liquid into a sooty gray. He uses long, even strokes, mindful to follow the grain rather than against it. The lumber gradually lightens and the intricate pattern of rings becomes visible, a silent testament to the tree that once stood in a forest outside the city. When the burlap no longer picks up grime, he sets the cloth aside and retrieves a tin of linseed oil, its lid sealed with a simple screw cap. He unscrews it and inhales the faint, earthy scent. With a small brush, he applies a thin coat to the smooth beams, paying special attention to areas where water might have blemished the wood. The oil soaks in, accentuating the honeyed tones of the aged timber. A soft sheen appears as if the ladder has been granted a second life. The lamplighter repeats this entire process with each ladder in turn. As he works, time seems to stretch. His movements slow to a contemplative cadence, almost meditative: rinse, scrub, oil, set aside. After a while, the room is filled with the faint aroma of linseed and damp wood, mingling with the memory of yesterday's flame. The spatial arrangement of ladders, once an untidy stack shoved against the back wall, now stands in neat order, each one pristinely prepared for evening's ascent. Beside the ladders, another ritual unfolds. On a long work table lie several soot-stained shovel heads. The flat blades used to clean fireplaces in the lamp house and to scoop ashes from spent wicks. The lamplighter picks up the first shovel, noting the crater of hardened carbon clinging to its edges. He positions it beneath the cold, angled spout of a tall water barrel. With a tug of the lever, a fine spray arcs downward, striking the metal in a hiss of droplets. Steam rises where hot soot meets cool water. He tilts the shovel and repeats the spray, watching as loose grime washes away in rivulets that follow the blade's curve, disappearing into a shallow trough beneath the barrel. After rinsing, he wipes the blade with an old canvas rag, scrubbing gently to coax off any residual ash. The wet rags turn from black to gray to nearly white as he works. He sets the shovel head aside and moves to the next, until all have been cleansed. Then he sprinkles a pinch of dry sand onto each metal surface, an old trick to absorb leftover moisture and prevent rust, and brushes the sand free. In the end, each shovel head regains its original sheen of cold steel, the sweeping scars of use replaced by uniform glimmer. At last he gathers his implements: the wire brush, the burlap cloth, the bucket of linseed oil, the water hose, and the damp rags. Carefully he hangs each tool on the pegboard that runs the length of one wall. On the highest row he places the longest brushes. Below those, the mid-sized scrubbing cloths and oil brushes occupy evenly spaced hooks. The shovels and smaller scraper heads hang in the middle, while the bottom row is reserved for buckets and damp rags. The lamplighter steps back and lifts his chin in quiet satisfaction. Before him stands an orderly display, tools arrayed by type and size, each one gleaming softly in the dim lantern glow. The cleanliness of the workshop feels almost ceremonial, as if the very air has been purified. He looks at the thatched roof overhead and the stone floor beneath, both now free of scattered debris. A gentle stillness has settled, broken only by the distant chime of a church clock, reminding him that midday is nearly spent. The hush is not empty, it hums with potential. Soon the lamps will need fresh oil, the wicks will have to be cut and shaped, and the route must be mapped. But for this brief moment, all is in readiness. He closes his eyes and inhales deeply. The scent of linseed oil lingers, interwoven with mineral notes from the water and a subtle trace of soot that washed away but refuses to vanish completely. It is the perfume of preparation. In his mind he runs through the evening's tasks, blending oils to just the right viscosity, trimming wicks until their tips glow steadily, arranging lanterns on the bench. He sees the winding streets of London bathed in twilight, the lamps standing like sentinels along the cobblestones, and he feels the calm certainty that comes from knowing his tools will perform without fail. A low breeze drifts in through a small high window, stirring a single loose page pinned to the notice board, a handwritten list of lamp posts in need of repair, marked with charcoal and careful checkmarks. The sheet flutters once and then settles. The lamplighter steps forward, picks up the paper and tucks it into his apron pocket. He runs a final glance over the workshop, ensuring that every ladder is spotless, every shovel hung, every brush in place. Only then does he allow himself to step away from the display. He extinguishes the lantern on the workbench, its amber glow fading until the only light comes from a shaft of gray daylight slanting through the window. The tools now rest, awaiting the next summons. The ladders lean in patient rows, ready to bear him aloft. The hush deepens, wrapping the lamp house in a silent promise that when dusk returns all will be well and the nightly ritual can begin anew. Late morning light filters through the narrow high-set windows of the lamp house's blending room, slanting across rough-hewn floorboards that still retain the faint scent of wax polish and soot. The air is warm, suffused with a gentle hum of summer insects drifting in on a breeze through the open shutters. After the precise choreography of polishing ladders and brushing soot from tools, the lamplighter pauses at a heavy wooden table scarred by decades of measurement marks and oil stains. Here begins the ritual that will shape every flicker of flame come dusk, the midday oil blending. He runs a careful finger along the edge of a cylindrical brass measuring vessel, its surface cool to the touch, etched with delicate calibrations. Each etched line indicates a precise volume of camphene oil, the purest grade available for lamplight. Camphene, distilled from turpentine and alcohol, burns clear and bright, but its brisk tang must be tempered for the gentle glow desired on London streets. A nearby wooden barrel, labeled in looping copperplate script, contains the day's allotment. Lifting the barrel's metal lid, the lamplighter breathes in the clean, resinous aroma, tinged faintly with the sharpness of pine. Slowly, deliberately, he tilts the barrel to pour the pale liquid into the measuring cylinder. A thin ribbon of oil arcs through the yellow light, glinting like captured sunlight. When the desired mark is reached, he steadies the cylinder and sets it back on the table with a soft clink. Each movement is measured, almost reverent. The entire workshop seems to hold its breath. He glances at a small ledger opened at one corner of the table, where he has recorded ratios from previous evenings. 3 parts camphene to 1 part refined kerosene, with a whisper of sandalwood essence to mute the harsher notes. From a squat glass bottle, he uncorks a dropper containing a single concentrated essence of lavender. The bottle stopper has been wrapped with a thin strip of parchment bearing the date and blend code, A18. A single droplet, barely the size of a dewdrop, quivers at the tip of the glass tube. He releases it into the cylinder. The resinous oil stills for a heartbeat, then accepts the tiny drop as if to cradle it. Already the smell shifts, the pine sharpness softens and a subtle sweetness emerges beneath the oil's warmth. With both hands, he lifts the measuring cylinder and carries it to the copper vat seated in the center of the room. The vat's rosy metal surface gleams under the sunbeams, warmed by a small flame lazily flickering below. A ring of soot-black rivets secures the vat's thick walls. He pours the oil in a thin, steady stream. The liquid catches the light, golden, almost luminous, as it spreads across the vat's wide interior. Beside the vat stands a wooden paddle, its handle smoothed by hundreds of strokes. He savors the momentary silence before plunging the paddle into the warm oil. The paddle makes a soft, resonant scrape against the vat's side as he begins to stir. The motion is slow and rhythmic, a sweep from one edge to the other, drawing spirals that grow wider with each turn. The oil thickens into a uniform hue, each swirl folding the sandalwood-infused camphene into the kerosene base. Tiny bubbles rise and burst, whispering to the quiet room. His grip on the paddle is firm but unhurried, no sudden jerks, no haste. While stirring, he pauses to observe the mixture's viscosity. It glides over the paddle in a gentle, unbroken ribbon. Satisfied, he lifts a small copper spoon from a hook on the vat's lip. The spoon is dented and chamfered, marked by years of faithful service. He dips it into the blend and raises it to his lips. The taste is clean and swift, a breath of pine, a trailing sweetness that lingers like a memory. He closes his eyes to concentrate, then nods quietly. It is neither too light, lest the flame sputter, nor too rich, lest it burn too hot or foul the chimney glass. It is the perfect balance. Setting the spoon aside, he reaches for a glass carafe sealed with a cork stopper. With careful hands, he strains the oil through a fine linen cloth draped over a small funnel atop the carafe. The cloth traps any stray sediment, ensuring each drop of fuel is pure as it trickles into the vessel below. When the carafe is full, he stamps it with a small metal die bearing his initials, then writes the blend number and date on a strip of parchment, which he fastens to the neck with twine. The carafe joins a neat row of others, each labeled, each waiting for evening's final preparations. The lamplighter leans back against the table and allows himself a moment to close his eyes. Through the open window he can hear the distant clatter of horse-drawn carts, the soft murmur of a street vendor hawking midday wares, and the steady ticking of a brass clock fixed high on the wall. He inhales deeply. The blending room is filled with the mingled scents of camphene, sandalwood, and warm copper. It is a fragrance that will be carried aloft by every lamp, guiding the city's travelers until the first hint of dawn. In this midday stillness, he reflects on the simple continuity of his craft. Each evening he will carry this numbered carafe across cobbled streets, leaning over ancient iron lamp posts to pour this very oil into reservoirs, striking a match and listening to the familiar hiss that heralds light. For all the city's ceaseless bustle, there is solace in this measured ritual. Select, blend, perfect, preserve. He straightens and opens the ledger again, transcribing the final details of the blend. Tomorrow he will adjust once more, a fraction more kerosene for the autumn chill, perhaps a drop of rose essence to temper the winter's harsher edge. But for today the mixture is complete. He caps the copper vat tightly, wipes its rim with an oiled rag and sets the paddle back on its hook. As he turns to leave the blending room, he pauses at the threshold. The warm light behind him is edged by the cool shadows of the workshop beyond. He steps through with the air of a keeper entrusted with a secret, that in these silent afternoons, amid the hiss of oil and the scrape of paddle on metal, he creates the very substance of night. Ahead lie the careful shaping of cotton wicks and the painstaking mapping of lampposts, each following in turn. But for now the ritual is complete, and the city's lamps await their lifeblood, sealed and numbered, ready to scatter the darkness tomorrow evening. A pale beam of afternoon sunlight filters through the single dusty window of the lamp house, illuminating a long wooden table scarred by years of careful work. Having completed the meticulous task of blending oils to just the right consistency, each measure of camphene and kerosene stirred with precise deliberation. The lamplighter now turns his attention to the cotton wicks that will sustain each flame. Here, in this quiet corner of the workshop, he prepares the final essential component for the evening's ritual: the slender, perfect strands of cotton that will draw oil and feed the gas burners in London streets. He begins by reaching for a length of unprocessed cotton fibers, stored in a shallow wooden crate at his side. The fibers lie in loose, unspun clumps, ivory white against the dark patina of the work table. He lifts a gentle handful, feeling the slight resistance of massed strands before they yield to his touch. Settling himself on a narrow stool, he smooths the cotton out along a straight edge, an oak measuring board etched with fine lines, each marking another 1/16 of an inch. The grain of the wood and the etched lines guide his eye with unfailing precision. His fingers brush lightly over the fibers, teasing them apart and removing any stray bits of debris or hitching strands that might later ignite unevenly. With everything arranged, he reaches for the slender shears that hang from a nail overhead. These scissors, with polished brass handles and cold iron blades, are shaped to cradle each wick without crushing the delicate fibers. He tests their cut by snipping a scrap, listening for the soft, satisfying snick as the blades close cleanly. Then, aligning the cotton with the 0 mark on the board, he presses the blades gently down and slices through the massed strands. The result is a wick exactly 3½ inches long, length determined by long experience to provide just enough burn surface without consuming oil too rapidly. He lifts the newly cut wick and lays it aside. One by one he repeats this process. Each snip of the shears is even and unhurried, the small mound of cut wicks growing steadily to his right. Between cuts, he breathes in the cotton's clean fibrous scent, recalling earlier hours spent handling brass oil tins whose aroma of camphene oil clung to his hands. Here, though, the odor is milder, almost sweet, tinged with the faint must of undyed textile. Occasionally he pauses, running a finger along a freshly cut wick, feeling for irregular strands that might later smolder or form an uneven flame. If a single fiber stands out of place, he sets the wick aside, destined for the scrap pile. When a dozen wicks have accumulated, he lifts them to eye level, turning them gently between his thumbs and forefingers. This is the moment to twist and compress the fibers, to coax them into a uniform shape that will draw oil smoothly and burn without flickering. He places the bundle against the measuring board again, centers the fibers and with measured pressure rolls them between palm and table, the strands twisting together in a tight, cohesive cylinder. As he compresses, he listens for the faint whisper of cotton fibers sliding against each other, a delicate susurration that indicates the fibers are aligning properly. Once twisted, he sets the bundle upright and taps the cut end against the board's edge, ensuring the fibers are even and flush. Any stray pieces are trimmed away with the shears. He repeats this compression and trimming until each wick stands as a miniature pillar of uniform width, its surface smooth and its cut end square and ready to fit into a burner's cap. Next comes the sorting. Alongside the measuring board sits a row of small labeled wooden boxes, each precisely sized to hold 20 wicks of a particular gauge. He opens the box marked 3.5-inch standard, and carefully lays each finished wick inside, stacking them like delicate coins. The boxes are lined with a soft cotton sheet to cushion the wicks and protect them from dust or accidental deformation. Once filled, he covers the box and affixes it with a small handwritten tag denoting both the date and the batch number. Should any issue arise later, if a wick proves faulty in the field, he will know exactly when it was cut and by whom. For a moment, he surveys his work, rows of small boxes each containing its precise allotment of wicks, ready to be whisked along on his evening rounds. The sight brings a gentle satisfaction, a sense of quiet pride in a task performed well. He recalls the earlier chapters of his day, the dawn stillness in the lamp house, the careful inspection of leather tins and old wicks, the bristle of the wire brush on ladder rungs, and the warm glow of oil blending in copper vats at midday. Each step has unfolded with deliberate calm, each process setting the stage for the ritual about to commence. Yet the shaping of wicks feels particularly intimate. It is the point at which raw materials become precise tools. In each slender cord of cotton, he sees the promise of a steady flame, a circle of golden light expanding into the gathering dusk. Every wick he cuts carries the responsibility of guiding a traveler down an alley or lending comfort to someone turning in at their doorstep. To err here is to risk dim or sputtering lamps, and he approaches the work with reverence. The afternoon deepens and shadows lengthen on the work table. He glances once more at the row of labeled boxes, a small fleet of cotton wicks made ready for service. The next chapter of his routine awaits, charting the course that will carry him through London's twisting streets, each lamp post a waypoint in a familiar pilgrimage. But before he steps back into the map-lined room across the workshop, he allows a few moments to linger at the table, hands resting on the smooth wood, inhaling the soft, clean scent of freshly cut cotton. In that quiet pause, the lamplighter contemplates the interconnectedness of every detail, how the judgment of a single snip can influence the breadth of a flame, how the twist of fibers can determine a lamp's steadiness against an autumn breeze, and how these small acts, repeated night after night, hold within them the power to shape people's journeys home. With this reflection, he stands and gently closes the lid on the last box, places a final tag and steps away. A low creak signals the workshop door being opened. The air beyond carries the first hint of evening chill. He crosses the floor toward the adjacent table strewn with parchment maps and charcoal sticks, the stage upon which he will next chart his course through the city's lantern-lit maze. The routine flows on, each chapter following the last in calm, measured progression. And as he picks up the rolled map and settles into the small wooden chair beside the flickering lantern, he carries with him the assurance that each perfectly shaped wick, each small cotton cord, will soon ignite into a steadfast flame, casting their glow across London's sleeping streets. Late afternoon sunlight filters through the small window of the lamp house, painting long golden slashes across the wooden work table. Amid the quiet hush, the lamplighter lays a broad parchment map flat before him, its surface soft and worn at the edges. Each crease and wrinkle tells of nights past, times when inked lines guided him down winding streets, over bridges and through hidden alleys. He smooths a palm over the paper, feeling the faint impression of charcoal and pencil, the gentle ridges where past routes were erased and redrawn. The distant clamor of horse-drawn carts on cobblestones drifts in, but here in this moment, there is only the deliberate scratch of charcoal on parchment. He reaches for a stub of charcoal, careful not to let it crumble. The scent of soot rises, mingling with the lingering trace of camphene oil from the day's earlier blending ritual. Lowering himself onto the creaking stool, he pauses, breath held as though offering a silent prayer to the city, London, vast and restless, soon to rely on the steady procession of glowing lamps. With a measured hand, he traces the slender line of Fleet Street, marking each lamp post with a small, neat circle. Beside every ring he writes a number, a tally of the stations to be kindled once dusk settles. 20, 21, 22. The sequence grows until every street corner, every narrow lane, is accounted for in neat, legible numerals. He glances at his notebook, a leather-bound volume bulging with folded lists and margin notes. Here a lamp sputtered on All Hallows Lane. There, a burner cap needed tightening near Fish Street Hill. With a quill dipped in inky water from a chipped porcelain pot, he jots footnotes, retrim wick number 17, and test valve number 42. Each scrawl is a promise to the night, that no flame will falter, no street remain dark. Pausing, he listens to the faint tapping of his nails against the table's worn edge, the distant clip-clop on the Thameside quay, and the soft hiss of air escaping from a half-closed shutter. Outside, the city's pulse quickens in anticipation, but inside the lamp house time seems to slow to match the lamplighter's steady rhythm. Refolding his arms, he surveys the map once more. He divides the route into 3 stages. The first third along the main thoroughfares where merchants still linger by their shop windows, the second through the maze of side streets, where only a watchman's lantern offers company, and the final stretch up the cobbled rise toward the hilltop lamps, sentinel by sentinel. For each section he estimates the pace, how many lamps he can attend in an hour, allowance for trimming wicks and adjusting gas flow, margin for unexpected gusts that might threaten a flame. With a slender wooden ruler, he measures the distance between posts, tapping the charcoal line with precision, aware that the slightest error may leave a corner of the city shrouded in darkness. Memories of past nights drift in unbidden. The time a sudden fog rolled in, turning each lamp into a floating halo, the time a high wind rattled the glass chimney until the flame danced like a living thing. He pauses there, tracing a finger over the spot on the map corresponding to the old stone bridge, where he once halted mid-round to catch his breath and watch the lamp's reflection ripple on the Thames. Even now the memory warms him. Each lamp is more than a point of light, it is a beacon, a guardian against the night's hush, and he the gardener whose careful tending ensures they live. As he works, the map's parchment absorbs the charcoal, darkening in places where he has retraced his path. He flips it gently, revealing annotations on the reverse. Notes on the blending of oils, scents added to temper the kerosene tang. Sketches of gutter flows where gas pressure can surge. Diagrams of burner caps, with tiny arrows indicating the direction of rotation. He straightens the map again, feeling the weight of responsibility settle across his shoulders. Soon he will don his waxed canvas apron, sling the leather oil tins to his side, and step into the gathering twilight. Tonight, as every night, the route must be exact. He stops to straighten his back, rubbing the small of his lower spine, reminded of the latter's strain on tired legs. A low flame flickers in a corner lantern, casting dancing shadows on the wall-mounted tools. There are polished shears, soot-darkened chimneys hanging in neat rows, and the long ladder with its iron rungs still gleaming from earlier polishing. These implements are silent companions in his ritual. Tomorrow they will carry him upward once more from lamp to lamp, until the first dawn light beckons him home. Focusing again, he draws the final arc on the map, a gentle curve that joins the last lamp on the high street to the lamp house itself. A line of charcoal connects the endpoint at Fishmonger Street back to these walls. The circuit is complete, a loop of assurance that every lantern, every burner will have his attention. With a decisive flick, he signs the corner of the map with his initials, E. For Edward Thompson, lamplighter to the Cathedral Precinct. In the quiet that follows, he rolls the parchment with careful fingers, easing out any hidden creases. He ties it with a length of twine, the knot neatly secured, then slips it into a slender leather tube, its brass cap clicking softly in place. He stands, stretching hands above his head, feeling the faint ache in shoulders and wrists. The room around him seems to breathe again, the hush broken by the scrape of stool on stone. He gathers the tube, sets it upon the bench, and places his quill back in its holder. For a moment he may linger here in the soft glow, but soon the sky will deepen to indigo, and his footsteps will echo on damp stones. The map, rolled and tied, rests beside the leather satchel already packed with freshly cut wicks and polished oil cans. All that remains is to wait for the lantern's signal, the final stroke that bids him begin. At last he steps back, takes one long, steadying breath, and turns his face toward the lamp house door. Behind him lies the measured calm of preparation. Ahead awaits the hush of dusk, shaping itself around the glow of each gaslit flame. With the evening route mapped in charcoal and ink, Edward Thompson is ready to guide London's shadows into light. A pale beam of spring sunlight filtered through the single window of the lamp house, drifting across dusty floorboards and illuminating faint motes of soot that hung suspended in the still air. At this hour, the workshop was hushed save for the distant rumble of wagon wheels on cobblestone and the soft ticking of a brass clock perched on the workbench. The lamplighter, having completed the 6 careful hours of midday preparations, oiling wicks, polishing tins, charting every lamp post he would tend, allowed himself a moment of gentle reprieve. He settled onto a low wooden stool at the center of the sprawling room, removed his leather satchel, and unwrapped the brown waxed cloth in which he had stowed his midday meal. Inside lay a modest feast, a thick wedge of cold rye bread, its crust firm yet yielding to the touch, a small round of Cheshire cheese, aged to a pale gold, and a handful of firm apples, their skins taut and gleaming. He unrolled the cloth and arranged the provisions carefully on a splintered plank that served as a makeshift table. His fingers, still faintly smeared with oil and soot from the morning's labors, brushed against the cool, clean surfaces of his bread and cheese. He broke a piece of the loaf free, inhaling its hearty aroma, a mingling of grain and earth, and brought it to his lips. Each bite was deliberate, savored with the satisfaction that comes from honest toil. Outside, the steady cadence of horse hoof beats and the distant creak of wagon axles formed a soothing backdrop. The lamplighter paused between mouthfuls to listen. A carriage clattering past on High Street, the subdued conversation of 2 coachmen beneath an elm tree, the low murmur of a distant porter negotiating the price of coal. Even in this lull, the city breathed and moved as if preparing to quiet itself once more for the coming dusk. He closed his eyes and allowed the hum of life beyond the window to fill his senses, a reminder that his work, though solitary at times, was woven into the fabric of London's nightly ritual. When the last mouthful of bread was gone, he reached for the wedge of cheese, careful to slice it thinly with the small bone-handled knife he always carried. The cheese offered a gentle tang that lingered on the tongue, and he swallowed slowly, welcoming the sense of fullness that steadied him. In the hush, he heard his own breath expand and contract, measured and calm. The distant clang of chiming bells marked the quarter hour, affirming that the day's pivot toward evening was at hand. From a worn leather satchel he drew a small journal bound in dark hide. Its pages were filled with neat iron gall ink entries, notes on the temperament of certain lamps, reminders of wicks that smoldered too quickly, observations about the camphine blend that he believed burned steadier under a rising breeze. He opened to the next blank page and produced a stub of graphite pencil, its tip sharpened to a precise point. For a moment he merely stared at the sheet, fingertips resting lightly on the grain of the paper, as though drawing breath before committing thought to memory. Then in calm, reflective strokes he began to write. He traced the arc of his morning, the scent of fresh cotton wicks laid out in the lamp house, the metallic click of ladlers scooping amber oil, the luster of polished ladders leaning neatly against the wall. His handwriting was deliberate, each word carrying the weight of centuries of tradition and quiet devotion. He made note of the weather, an unusually clear sky, a warm breeze that promised to linger until evening settled in. He recorded the state of his tools, the oil tins nearly full, the trimming shears sharpened just 3 days prior, the wick stock abundant from yesterday's cutting session. But his jotting was not merely technical. He paused to reflect on the ritual of light itself, how each small flame he would coax to life at dusk was an act of welcome, a gesture that reached into darkened streets and guided wayfarers home. He recalled how, as a child, he had watched his father perform the very same dance of ladder and lantern under these lamps, his face lit by pools of golden glow. In that memory the past and present converged, binding him in a chain of quiet custodianship that spanned generations. A low breeze stirred the curtains at the window, carrying a hint of evening on its breath, an imperceptible promise that soon the lamp-posts would stand sentinel along the thoroughfares once more. The lamplighter set down his pencil and closed the journal, sealing within its pages another fragment of a life spent in service to light. He reached out, smoothing his worn apron on the stool beside him, feeling the familiar weight of waxed canvas and stitched leather straps. In moments he would don the apron again, buckle his oil tins to his belt, and step out into the gathering twilight. But for now he lingered in the calm of midday. He rose slowly from the stool, muscles mellow with rest and meal. The mid-afternoon sun slanted lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the floor. Where before motes had glinted like fireflies in still air, now soft shafts of light punctuated the gloom with gentle warmth. He walked to the workbench and lifted a small cloth to brush a fine layer of soot from its surface, setting the brush down with measured care. The act itself was quiet and unhurried, a final small ritual before the shift resumed. In this gentle interlude, the lamplighter felt the enduring pulse of his vocation, a rhythm of preparation, performance, and reflection. Here in the lamp house time moved differently, measured not by mere hours, but by the slow dance of fuel and flame, the turn of a gear in a gas valve, the blooming of light against dark stone. He permitted himself a final glance around the room, the neat rows of full oil tins, the stack of trimmed wicks awaiting their turn, the coiled rope of the ladder resting at ease against the wall. Each object spoke of readiness, of an unbroken cycle he was destined to sustain. With a deep breath, he returned the journal to its satchel and secured the flap with a practiced tug. He wrapped the cloth of his midday meal about the small wooden plank and tucked it back inside, its purpose fulfilled for the day. Then one by one he collected his tools, oil can, trimming shears, substitute wicks, fastening each to the leather holster at his side. The apron fluttered slightly as he buckled the waist strap, a soft swish in the quiet room. He paused at the threshold of the lamp house, hand resting on the worn latch of the door. Beyond lay the winding streets of London, soon to be touched by the steady glow of hundreds of lamps. The lamplighter inhaled deeply, savoring the mingled scents of aged wood, warm oil, and the faintest hint of approaching dusk. For a heartbeat, he stood still, suspended between the restful noon and the ordered choreography of the evening round. Then he opened the door. The sunlight spilled outward, inviting him back into the world that awaited the first notes of his evening symphony. The whoosh of each ignition, the gentle hiss of gas, the glass chimney glowing bright against darkening skies. With quiet resolve, he stepped beyond the lamp house into the waning afternoon, each footfall a measured prelude to the ritual that would soon begin anew. The light in the lamp house waned to a pale amber as the distant sun sank behind slate-roofed terraces. Within the hush of the workshop, the lamplighters stood before the soldering glow of a single lantern perched upon the workbench. In the hours since noonday respite, he had measured and marked his evening route, blended oils, trimmed wicks and polished ladders. Now, as the sky shifted from gray to the soft violet of gathering twilight, he prepared to set foot on his nightly pilgrimage. He reached for the waxed canvas apron that hung on a stout peg by the door. Its heavy fabric, streaked with faint smudges of soot and oil, carried the comforting weight of ritual. Running calloused fingers over the brass buckles, he felt the subtle grooves left by each previous fastening. He steadied the apron, draping it over his shoulders, then slid each broad strap around his torso with deliberate care. A soft click came as the buckles met their clasps, the metal warm beneath his touch. The fit was snug. The wide expanse of canvas covered the front of his coat and most of his trouser legs, shielding them from accidental drips of camphine and ash. A subtle aroma of wax and resin rose from the canvas, old and familiar, like the stave of an unhurried hymn. He tugged gently on the straps to ensure beyond doubt that nothing would loosen once he embarked upon the damp streets. From his belt pouch, he withdrew a small, polished leather holster for his oil tins. The tins themselves were brass-bodied cylinders, each about the size of a man's clenched fist, filled to the brim with the late afternoon's carefully blended mixture of camphine and lamp oil. The sweet bite of petroleum lingered in the air around them. With a measured clink, he slid the first tin into the holster's snug curve. A second tin followed, its metal sides clicking against the first in a soft, metallic shuffle. The sound reminded him of the distant chimes of All Hallows Church that he had heard on his route earlier, gentle, insistent, a heartbeat in the hush. The tins nestled against his side, secure and ready for the tasks ahead. He then adjusted the leather belt that girded his waist. Hanging from it were the trimming shears, small scissor-like blades precise enough to reshape a wick's top with millimetric care, and a box of short wooden matches sealed in oiled paper to keep moisture at bay. He lifted the shears and tested their spring, noting the snap of the blades as they reopened. Each had been honed to a neat edge that coaxed away charred wick remnants without jarring the gas burner's delicate balancing screw. The matchbox felt smooth in his palm. He tapped it lightly against his boot to double-check the friction strip. All was ready. As he secured the matchbox within a stitched pocket, he paused to draw a breath. Outside, the sky had deepened into a gradient of plums and ink. The lamp house windows, curtained with stained glass, admitted only a scant portion of that dusk, leaving the room half in shadow. He inhaled the mingled scent of camphine oil, beeswax drips, and the faintest hint of chimney soot that lingered on his boots. In this moment of stillness, he imagined the first lamp post awaiting him on Chancery Lane, its iron-fluted shaft invisible now in the gloom, but soon to glow at his touch. Before stepping beyond the threshold, he reached for the parchment scroll pinned to a thumbtack on the wall. By lantern light, he unfolded it once more. It bore the map of his nightly circuit, each lamp post denoted by a small charcoal dot and accompanied by a tidy notation: replaced burner cap, sputtered last week, check gas valve. He traced the route with his finger, following the winding streets from the lamp house door, down Fleet Street's broad causeway, across the battered planks of Blackfriars Bridge, and on toward Westminster's shadowed quays. The map's edges curled softly from repeated folding, yet each line remained as crisp as the night's first frost. Satisfied that his mind carried the blueprint of the route, he rolled the parchment and tucked it into an inside pocket of his coat. The lamp house door stood before him, its iron-bound edges echoing the sturdy frame of each gas lamp he was soon to light. He paused, hand on the latch, and listened. A faint rustle of wind shuffled the leaves of a single ivy vine clinging to the outer wall. From the street beyond came the distant rumble of a wagon's wheel turning on cobblestone. A solitary crow rasped overhead, its silhouette slipping across the stained glass before vanishing into deepening night. He opened the heavy door and stepped out onto the threshold, letting the lamp house's warmth recede behind him. The door thudded shut with a sonorous echo that settled into the silent swirl of evening. A breath of cooler air brushed against his face. The street lamps were still unlit, dark stubs of metal and glass standing sentinel in the muted half-light. He raised a lantern kindled earlier within the lamp house, to guide his first steps. Its small flame flickered with a soft, golden pulse, illuminating the moist stones beneath his boots. Each cobble, smoothed over decades of horse hooves, gleamed with a fragile gloss that caught the lantern's glow. He moved forward, the lantern's beam dancing over an empty bench, a closed shop window, a stray folded newspaper dampened by dew. At the end of the block, he came to the first lamp post, a slender column of wrought iron crowned by a glass-enclosed burner. Here, at the moment when land's edge between day and night is most delicate, the lamplighter positioned his ladder. He placed it firmly, feeling the iron rungs hold tight against the damp wood of the plank beneath. He paused again, inhaling the faint scent of the river carried on the breeze, mingled with the sweetness of newly blended camphine. A steady drum of his heartbeat accompanied the distant tolling of Big Ben, marking the hour. Above all else, this is the ritual's pivot. Dusk gives way to lamplight. The first lamp, once ignited, yields a small triumph against encroaching dark. But for now he remained on the ground, sleeves rolled to his elbows, apron snug across his chest. He adjusted his belt, took one last look at the empty lamp, and steadying the lantern in his left hand, lifted his right to draw out a match. The soft click of striking flew in the stillness, and the slender flame danced to life. Here, at the threshold of twilight's end, the lamplighter stood poised. Brass buckles gleamed, oil tins nestled at his side, trimming shears and matches at the ready. In this hush, he savored the slow unfolding of routine, the quiet music of a job as old as the gas mains that threaded beneath London's streets. Beyond this first lamp lay a threaded procession of lights waiting to bloom. With the click of his match and the hiss of igniting gas, the city's nocturnal tapestry would unfurl one lamp at a time, and he, the devoted artisan of evening, would guide its steady, golden glow. He stands at the threshold of the lamp house, the weight of his lantern and oil tins settling comfortably against his hip. The heavy wooden door, recently secured behind him, breathes open on iron hinges with a muted groan, allowing the pale wash of the late afternoon sky to spill across the workbench inside. Now, with the lamp house at his back and the yawning streets of London before him, he takes his first steps into dusk. Each footfall reverberates softly on the cobblestones, the irregular stones cool and damp beneath his boots. He draws in a slow breath, tasting the tang of soot that lingers on his canvas apron, mingled with the faint sweetness of camphine oil. In this earliest moment, the city feels suspended between day and night, a hushed invitation to begin his nightly pilgrimage. He lifts the handheld lantern, its glass panels still clear from the afternoon's cleaning ritual. Inside, the small lamp flame pulses against the gathering gloom, casting a timid circle of light onto the uneven stones before him. The glow reveals the hidden contours of each cobble, fissures carved by carriage wheels, smooth ridges worn by countless footsteps, and the occasional scattering of straw or grit. A drop of moisture clings to the ledge of a curbstone, refracting golden lamplight like a tiny, transient jewel. He adjusts the oil reservoir with a gentle twist, ensuring the wick will not falter when he leans against the first post. In these careful calibrations lies the secret of a successful evening: faith that each flame, once coaxed alight, will stand steadfast until dawn approaches. For a moment, the city exhales. From somewhere beyond a row of brick-fronted shops, the toll of church bells drifts down the street. He pauses, lantern raised, and listens to the slow, measured cadence, dull clangs that resonate in his chest, marking both the hour and the city's quiet surrender to approaching darkness. The bells, borne on a still breeze, seem to weave through the crooked alleyways and low archways, rattling window panes and stirring echoes in empty doorways. He lingers until the final note fades, then lowers his gaze to the street ahead, now deepening into the soft blue of twilight. The lantern's halo becomes a comforting companion, guiding him toward the first lamp post that awaits tending. The air grows cooler as he rounds a corner beneath a gaslit shop sign that still burns faintly from the day's earlier tests. Its metal bracket juts from the wall, bearing the silhouette of a tailor's shears. From beneath, a tenuous flame flickers in its curved glass, refracted by wisps of soot clinging to the chimney. He catches a breath of the evening breeze, scented with soot, coal smoke, and the distant brine of the Thames. It carries whispers of the city's nocturnal life, the muffled clip-clop of horses on the embankment, the far-off scrape of a barge being guided upriver, a solitary dog padding through a side passage. Each sound overlays the hush of his own measured steps, turning the ordinary street into a tapestry of subtle urgencies and latent stories. He approaches the first lamp post, a slender column of wrought iron rising just above shoulder height. The glass lantern at its summit appears dark at first, but he perceives a faint glimmer where the wick should rest. Kneeling ever so slightly, he props the ladder against the shaft, its rungs worn smooth by countless rests and tests. He steadies himself, wrenching a small gas valve closed to silence the soft hiss of escaping vapor. The lamplight from his hand lantern illuminates the reservoir cap, and he reaches for the oil tin fastened to his belt. With deliberate motions honed by months of repetition, he unscrews the cap, pauses to inhale the familiar aroma of camphene and kerosene, and pours the golden liquid into the lamp's feed chamber. The stream arcs for a moment like molten metal, then settles, rippling in the reservoir until it finds its level. He replaces the cap, checks the wick's length, and taps the ladder to signal readiness. Above him, the glow of a few distant lamps begins to spread along the street, their flames blossoming like quiet promises in the encroaching dusk. They are the earliest of his domain, the first milestones on the route mapped in his mind before sunset. He runs a gloved finger along the ladder's wooden rail, feeling the texture of wood polished by passing hands and time. In this touch lies a reassurance, the knowledge that every fixture here has a story, every lamp post its own small significance. He steadies his breathing and reaches for the torch in his pocket, a short length of wood soaked in resin, wrapped at one end in pitch. Lighting it from his lantern's flame, he draws it upward toward the lamp's gas inlet. A soft hiss follows, and then, as though awakening, the lamp responds with a gentle bloom of light. The glass chimney warms, softened by the rising flame, and the darkness retreats beyond the lantern's reach. He descends the ladder and steps back to survey the newly kindled lamp. Its glow paints the cobbles in warm amber, revealing the street's hidden details. The carved initials on a gatepost, a forgotten penny lying in a shallow puddle, the pattern of mortar where two stones have settled unevenly. In this golden pool he sees more than just a lamp, it is a guardian of memory, a silent witness to each evening's quiet dramas. He rests his lantern atop the lamp-post's parking hook, allowing the two lights to intertwine for a moment. His portable flame wobbling in the breeze, the gas lamp stable and unwavering. Then he retrieves his ladder and torch and moves on, leaving behind a small circle of calm illumination that will endure until dawn's pale fingers brush the sky. As he walks away, he listens once more for the distant church bells, now muted by the thicker night. Their faint resonance seems to confer a blessing upon the lanterns already alight, as though the city itself is granting him passage. The chilled air presses against his cheeks, carrying with it the whispered promise of countless nights yet to come. He glances upward at the first few lamp-posts strung along the street, beacons marking his path through the labyrinth of London's winding lanes. Each faint glow reminds him of his purpose, to banish the gathering darkness, one steady flame at a time. With his lantern held aloft and his ladder rebundled against his shoulder, he steps deeper into twilight. His shadow lengthens behind him, stretching across wet stones glimmering in the lamplight. He can almost see his route unfolding ahead, a sequence of softly glowing orbs that beckon him onward. In this calm, reflective moment, he feels rooted to the city, part of a tradition that spans decades and generations, an unbroken chain linking lamplighter to lamplighter. He presses on, lantern steady in hand, heart steady in purpose, ready to kindle the first of many flames as dusk gives way to full night. Soon the entire street will lie bathed in his work, each lamp a small triumph over the darkness. And when that time comes he will pause once more, listen for the bells, feel the breeze, and give thanks for the quiet ritual that sustains both him and the city he serves. The gas lamp stood silent in the gathering dusk, its iron post rising like a sentry above the cobbles. The lamplighter paused a step back, taking in the first lamppost of his round as though greeting an old friend. A chill wind stirred through the narrow street, carrying the faint scent of damp straw from a nearby stable and the distant smoke of half-extinguished hearths. In that gentle half-light, the lamp's metal frame looked cold and expectant, waiting for the breath of flame to bring it to life. The lamplighter shifted the leather strap of his oil can on his shoulder, the worn canvas of his apron rustling softly, and approached the lamp with measured footsteps. He planted the feet of his ladder into the ruts of the road, feeling the rough edges of the wood press into the soles of his boots. Each rung was familiar beneath his glove-clad hand. The lowest rung smooth from countless climbs, the upper one slightly rough where splinters had been filed away. With a quiet grunt, he leaned the ladder against the lamp post, listening to the soft scrape of wood on iron. The street was nearly silent save for the distant toll of church bells announcing the hour and the whisper of wind through narrow alleys. Here in this hushed moment the world seemed paused between day and night. Balancing the oil can carefully at his waist, he reached up to the lamp's reservoir cap, which lay threaded with fine grooves to ensure a snug seal. His fingers found the brass fitting and turned it slowly, releasing a faint hiss of escaping air. He set the cap aside on the ladder's third rung, then tipped the can to pour the blended camphine oil into the reservoir. The amber liquid sloshed softly, catching the last glimmer of sunset through the glass chimney. He filled it just to the brim, no more no less, so that the flame would burn true without sputter or flood. Next came the wick. Gently he lowered a fresh cotton wick into its place, guiding it through the metal feeder until it sat curled inside the reservoir's heart. The wick's tip protruded just above the lip of the burner, cut to allow a single steady tongue of flame. He pressed the wick's end with the flat of his trimming shears, smoothing any stray fibers. A single imperfect strand could cause the lamp to smoke or flicker. Such blemishes he could not allow. He listened to the faint metallic clink as he replaced the wick's guard and tightened the small wing nut that held everything in alignment. Below him the gas inlet awaited its spark. The lamplighter reached into his coat pocket for the tinder pouch, a bit of charred cloth tucked carefully in oiled flannel. He drew forth a slender torch, its flame already dancing atop a short length of wood darkened by previous night's use. The torchlight bobbed in the soft gloom as he raised it toward the tiny nozzle where gas would issue forth. Beneath his hand, he turned the valve open with a practiced twist, and for a moment there was only a faint hiss, like the breath of a sleeping animal. Then at the tip of the torch the hiss met the flame and was transformed. A small burst of orange light leapt between the torch and the lamp's burner. The flame inside the chimney took hold, bright at first and then golden, as if a captive sun had awakened within the little glass enclosure. The lamplighter lowered the torch, letting the lamp's own light grow until it shone steadily. Shadows retreated from the corners of the street, and the lamp's glow spread across the wet stones in a warm pool. He watched for a moment, ensuring the flame did not flicker or lean to one side. All was well. Leaning close, he breathed in the soft, smoky aroma of burning gas and camphine, not unpleasant, but rich and reminiscent of quiet hearth fires. His cheeks warmed beneath the glow. In that light, the rough texture of cobbles and the peeling paint of nearby shutters took on a comforting familiarity. It was a small miracle each night, this kindling of flame. A ritual of renewal that banished darkness and invited the city to stir, to walk, to breathe again in illuminated safety. He straightened slowly, his hands steady on the ladder's rungs as he descended. With each step he felt the night's shifting temperature. Colder at the top where the wind had free passage, milder below where the lamp's warmth pooled. Once his boots touched the ground, he touched the lamp post in passing, a silent benediction for an evening well begun. The lamp stood bright now, a beacon in the dim street, and the lamplighter nodded to it as if greeting an ally. Gathering his tools, he slung the ladder over one shoulder and set off toward the next lamp. His footsteps were soft and deliberate, cushioned by the damp road. The clink of the oil can and the soft rustle of his apron were the only sounds alongside the crackle of the newly lit lamp. In the distance, another lamp awaited its turn, dark and awaiting the same tender choreography. He paused for a moment at the corner, inhaling the crisp night air and savoring the quiet triumph of a perfect first flame. The first lamp marked the beginning of his nightly pilgrimage. Each subsequent lamp would be kindled in turn, and the city would slowly kneel under a row of luminous sentinels. But there was something sacred about that initial ignition, a promise that darkness could be held at bay through patience, skill, and steady hands. And so he walked on, the newly lit lamp at his back guiding his path forward into the gentle unfolding of the Victorian night. The night has settled into a deep, gentle hush by the time our lamplighter turns away from the first lamp he has kindled. Behind him, a soft pool of amber light spreads across the damp stones, warm at the edges, flickering ever so slightly in answer to the faint currents of air drifting down the narrow alley. The hiss of gas merging with the flame still lingers in his ears, a comforting, expectant sound that signals progress, that each corner of the city he tends will soon glow against the dark. He lowers his ladder from the iron post with a muted scrape, the metal against stone echoing like a muted footstep in an empty gallery. With practiced grace, he settles the ladder against the next lampstand, gauging its height by ear rather than sight. The lamps are numbered in his mind. 1, 2, 3, each a milestone in his nightly pilgrimage through London's twisting lanes. He props the ladder firmly, tests its steadiness with a gentle kick against a cobblestone, then begins the ascent. The rungs feel familiar beneath his boots, worn smooth through countless climbs, each one a testament to nights much like this. His leather apron falls into place against his chest, the camphine oil tins resting snugly at his side, and he breathes in the quiet perfume of waxed canvas and smoldering wick. At the lamp's reservoir cap, he pauses. The polished balance of flame depends on this moment. Too much oil and the wick might spatter, too little and it might gutter. He unscrews the cap, the threads whispering against each other, and tilts the reservoir just so. A soft glug of blended oil slips into the chamber, and he hears the tiny bubble of air breaking free. He screws the cap back with exacting care, wipes a glimmer of residue from the metal with his thumb, then steps back on the rungs to the burner head. His fingers close around a match, never too close to the face, never too far from the gas inlet. A hush, and then the slight crackle of ignition as the flame takes hold. In the narrow radius of his raised hand, the gas finds life. He leans closer, one hand steadying the chimney's rim, the other poised to trim the wick, ensuring it will burn clean and straight. The wick's edge glows as he adjusts it, just enough to coax the perfect arc of fire. A calm blaze asserts itself behind the glass, and he allows himself a brief moment to admire the transformation. A pillar of darkness becomes a beacon, a silent invitation to those who walk below. He places a gentle finger on the glass exterior, cool, touched with a trace of soot, and wipes away the midnight residue so that the light shines unclouded. Descending, he hears again that signature hiss, bright and reassuring. It trails off only when his boots touch the cobbles, as if to salute his safe return to the ground. Then he steps back, surveying the scene. The narrow lane has changed character under the lamp's glow. Shadows recede, window panes, once black voids, now reveal veiled interiors. A warm hearth here, a grandmother's silhouette there. Lantern-lit advertisements on shop fronts glow to life, and a faint echo of private conversations drifts from half-open doors. The lamplighter inhales deeply, relishing the contrast between the hush enveloping him now and the interval of life these lamps are returning to these streets. There is poetry in routine. Each lamp lit is a small promise delivered, a cradle of steadiness amid the city's restless sleep. He lifts the ladder once more, balancing its weight on his shoulder as he moves on. The oil can clink softly with each step, a companion note to his footfalls. Above, an unseen starless sky stretches vast and silent. The lamps will not only guide travelers tonight but serve as silent witnesses to his solitary devotion. He counts in his head, 44 lamps to this point, 30 more to go. The counting steadies him, threads through the dark hours to keep him aligned with purpose. Occasionally he pauses to listen, distant carriage wheels creaking on the bridge, the low toll of a church bell marking the late hour, the gentle rush of breeze through a narrow passage. At the next post the ritual repeats. He bristles lightly at a sudden puff of wind that wavers the flame as it emerges from the chimney. With one hand he braces the glass, with the other he dips into his apron pocket for a small poker to adjust the wick. He permits no flicker to survive, no waver of brightness. Each lamp must stand unwavering, its glow uniform from top to bottom. The whisper of old iron ladder rungs under his boots, the hiss of gas, the breathy sigh as he wipes glass, the steady glow spilling outward, all combine into a gentle symphony of nightly work. He becomes part of the city's quiet breathing, the city part of his own. Between lampstands he encounters only the rare figure, a night watchman trudging along his beat, the guard's lamp already lit by some other street worker. They exchange a nod, an almost imperceptible gesture. No words, only shared understanding. In that moment, the lamplighter feels the weave of community that binds them. Those who serve the night, unseen but indispensable. He offers the watchman an extra match anyway, a small token of courtesy, and continues on, stepping back into the hush. Sometimes as he passes under a newly awakened lamp, he glances skyward, aware of the glass dome overhead capturing the light like a bubble. The lamp's brass fittings gleam, the softened halo cast upon the lintel of a doorway. He thinks of the countless Londoners who once drew comfort from this ritual, who looked up to these lamps as beacons in uncertain times. Each twist of the gas valve, each careful placement of wick, each sheen-scrubbed chimney is a link in a chain that stretches back through decades, and forward into the centuries that will follow long after the gas has dimmed. By the time he reaches the midway point of his route, the hiss has become a steady refrain in his mind, a mantra that accompanies every measured step. The cycles of climb, light, wipe, step back, descend, and move on are so familiar they take on a melodic, almost hypnotic quality. Yet he remains alert, attentive to the mood of each lampstand. Some lean precariously toward the street, others hide beneath overgrown vines that flutter in the night breeze. He adjusts each with care, straightening posts, clearing branches away so that the light can travel unimpeded. The city unwinds before him in segments of golden illumination. A courtyard here, a hidden alley there, a square of polished stones revealing the sheen of past rain. All around, the world feels both vast and intimate, at once majestic in its scale and personal in its details. He notices a stray cat, its eyes reflecting the glow, slipping between shadowy crates behind a warehouse. He catches sight of distant lantern-lit ships moored on the Thames, the river's black surface rippling under the glow of lamps along the embankment. As he finishes lighting the 35th lamp of the evening, he pauses for a lingered moment. The hiss dwindles, the light blossoms fully into its glass chamber. He places a hand on the iron post and closes his eyes, breathing in the gentle warmth radiating outward. Beneath this arc of light, he feels the weight of solitude lift, replaced by a profound sense of contribution. Each lamp is more than a flame, it is a symbol of comfort, of guidance, of the ceaseless churn of civic duty carried out in silence. Without hurry he takes down his ladder, stowing tools with a soft clatter. Then he steps back once more to admire a short stretch of street now stitched together by scattered orbs of light. The hissing has ceased, leaving only the steady glow, as if the lamps themselves are breathing softly, alive inside their chimneys. In this delicate balance of glow and dark, of sound and stillness, the lamplighter finds his place, a solitary steward of the night, laying down a path of gentle illumination for all who will tread it. With a final glance at the lit posts behind him, he sets his steps toward the next row, the hiss renewing itself in a quiet echo, guiding him forward into the deeper hours of his patient, unending round. The moment I set foot on the creaking wooden planks of Blackfriars Bridge, the night seemed to deepen around me in a hush so profound it felt almost alive. Each board beneath my boots murmured a soft complaint as if reminding me of its own century of service, and I paused, leaning one gloved hand against the cold, curved iron railing. Above me the moon lay low, a silver coin in the ink-black sky, and all along the river's edge, the arcs of gaslight shimmered and danced upon the silted surface of the Thames. The lamps I had kindled on the south bank, now modest beacons suspended between earth and water, threw slender reflections that quivered with every tiny ripple. In that quiet moment, I felt the pulse of the city's nightly ritual beating in slow, deliberate rhythm. A soft wind carried the distant echo of a street organ's lament from afar, mingling with the faint clang of hammers in an all-night workshop. The tang of damp wood and river mist mingled on my tongue, drawing me deeper into the silent dialogue between light and shadow. I closed my eyes briefly and inhaled the chill-laced air, tasting the soot of freshly lit lamps and the tang of coal smoke drifting upstream. Each breath I drew seemed to hold the weight of countless nights spent traversing these same stones and planks, performing this time-honored duty that had outlasted the reigns of monarchs and the clang of revolution. Opening my eyes, I lifted the lantern at my side, a modest glass cylinder enclosing its own little wick, and watched the wisp of flame tremble. The glow cast a pale halo around my boots, illuminating the embossed leather of my apron and the brass buckles at my waist. In its reflected gleam I could just discern the curve of the bridge's arch, the pattern of rivets fastening wrought iron girders together, and the distant line of posts waiting for me on the opposite shore. For a heartbeat, the world felt suspended between the warmth of each lit lamp and the chill of the water below. I resumed my slow, deliberate steps, each footfall falling into the hush that stretched between lamps. My ladder, propped against my shoulder, tapped a gentle counterpoint upon the railing with every stride. A flash of sparks danced along the metal where the ladder's iron feet struck against old paint, releasing a whispered clang that faded into the starless night. The river surged quietly beneath, its gentle swell like the slow breath of some great, sleeping creature. I paused once more, gazing over the railing to watch the dark undercurrent, shining veins of reflected light snaking across its surface. In those reflective arcs, the lamps seemed to multiply, stars scattered in mirrored array, and for an instant I felt as though I was walking between two heavens. Halfway across, the distant splash of oars drifted toward me. A small skiff, ferried by a lone waterman, slipped silently along the shore, its lantern bobbing like a firefly in the gloom. The man's silhouette was dark against the lantern's glow, and he offered me a brief nod as he drifted by. His craft cut a smooth path through the water, and each stroke of the oar sent faint ripples through the starlit reflections. We shared a tacit acknowledgement of our separate duties, his to guide weary souls across the river's breadth, mine to render the dark streets safe and visible. In that passing exchange there was a feeling of kinship, a silent promise that our work kept the city turning, hour by hour, through the night. As I reached the midpoint of the span, I paused to tighten the strap of the leather oil tin at my belt. The canvas of my apron rustled softly under my hand, and I felt the comforting weight of my tools: trimming scissors, matches kept safe in brass, a small cloth for wiping sooty chimneys. Each implement was arranged with care, a testament to the precision this work demanded. The lamps ahead, unlit in their sockets, awaited my arrival like patient sentinels. I counted them mentally, 16 posts in a line, arching northward toward the shore and into the winding streets beyond. My route was etched into my mind, each lamp a milestone, each ignition a promise of warmth in the coming darkness. With measured care, I placed my ladder against the first lamppost beyond the bridge's end. Its iron surface was cold and slick with night moisture. I steadied the ladder's feet with gentle taps and began my ascent, each rung offering a secure foothold. The lamp top stood just within reach. I inserted the wick, careful to align it evenly, then poured a measured stream of camphene-blended oil into the reservoir. A brief hiss greeted the torch's kiss, and the lamp caught flame, its glass chimney catching sparks of light that scattered like fireflies. I lingered a moment to wipe any stray soot from the chimney's exterior, then stepped back to admire the gentle bloom of yellow against the night. Below, the Thames mirrored that glow, doubling each small flame with a liquid reflection that flickered across the water's dark canvas. I imagined the river itself was alive with lantern light, its currents carrying the lamplight downstream toward docks and quays unseen. The hush deepened once more, broken only by the soft pad of my boots returning to the bridge's walkway. Each lamp I lit seemed to illuminate a piece of history, an echo of the countless lamplighters who had made this same pilgrimage. I pressed on, climbing over the final arch of the bridge. The lamps here cast a narrower span of light, leaving long ribbed shadows between edges of stone. I paused again, leaning on the lamppost to gaze back toward where I had come. The south bank lay steeped in darkness save for the lanterns I had ignited, and the bridge itself stretched behind me like a luminous spine rising from the river. The gas pipes overhead, riveted into the ironwork, glowed faintly where the moonlight struck. I traced their path with a finger, feeling their cold hardness through my glove, aware that each conduit carried the lifeblood of the city's illumination. At the end of the crossing, the first house fronts of the North Shore stood silent. A solitary chimney let out a thin wisp of smoke, drifting into the night sky. The scent of coal soot grew stronger here, mingling with the damp timber and river's brine. I set my ladder against the next lamppost and repeated the familiar choreography, securing the wick, filling the oil reservoir, lighting the flame. Each step was a small victory over the darkness. The hiss, the bloom, the citrus warmth of the glass lamp responding to life. These were the moments I lived for, the quiet fulfillment of a nightly promise. With the final lamp atop the bridge's northern parapet ignited, I paused yet again, standing beneath its gentle glow. The river before me lay as still and silent as if held in a dream. Dawn remained hours away, and yet in this moment I felt a bridge not only between two banks of London, but between night and the slowly stirring world beyond. My task on the bridge was complete, and ahead lay the winding streets of the city proper, each lamppost waiting for me to draw its light out of darkness. I lifted my ladder, slung the oil tin securely at my side and took a steadying breath. The lamps on both banks now formed a shimmering chain, reflected in water and metal alike, guiding me onward. In the stillness, I heard the soft echo of my own heartbeat, measured and calm. This midnight crossing had been a threshold, a silent truce with the night. With one last glance at the mirrored stars dancing on the Thames, I stepped forward into the deep glow of gaslight, ready for the next chapter of the Lamplighters' vigil through London's sleeping streets. A thin mist hovered over the riverbank as I descended from the far side of London Bridge. The lamps I had kindled so far formed a ribbon of soft gold behind me, each flame steady and bright against the dark water. Now ahead, one post stood half in shadow, its glow faltering. A sudden gust from the river had caught its flame like a breath on a candle wick, leaving it gasping in fitful spurts. Even at a distance I could see the chimney glass tremble, droplets of condensation beating along its inner surface. I paused, resting one hand on the ladder's worn rail, and let the hush of the Thames fill my senses. The faint slap of oars, the distant echo of horse hooves, the low murmur of water against stone. I moved forward with slow deliberation, each footfall soft upon the damp cobbles. Night's cool air carried a hint of camphene and soot, mixed with the fresh, slightly tangy scent of escaping gas. My lantern's glow cast long, wavering shadows, while the lamp's own wavering flame cast a trembling pool of light onto the stones. Reaching out, I pressed a gloved hand against the iron post to steady myself, then placed my ladder foot by foot against the post until it stood firm. The rungs bore the smooth shine of countless climbs, my silent testament to this nightly ritual. Sliding 2 fingers under the chimney's rim, I lifted the sooty glass away in one careful motion. It fell into my free hand with a soft clink, the warm metal of its frame still tempered by heat. A fine layer of soot dusted the rim, and the glass itself had fogged slightly from moisture. Raising it to my lips, I gave it a gentle shake. Tiny particles drifted away like gray snowflakes. With my other hand I rubbed a corner of my apron across the exterior, polishing until light could pass through without distortion. As I did so, my mind wandered to earlier hours in the lamp house. Rows of unlit chimneys waiting on their pegs, each one scrubbed by my own hand until it gleamed. Chimney restored, I set it aside on the ladder's top rail and unhooked my trimming shears from the belt at my side. The wick lay half consumed within the burner's reservoir, its top charred and uneven. I bent close, inhaling the faint smell of old oil and cotton. With precision scissors I snipped the charred tip from the wick, the blades making a quiet snick as they cut. A small curl of blackened fiber fell into my palm. I dusted the wick's new edge against a scrap of clean linen, ensuring no stray threads remained to mar the flame. Each motion was deliberate, practiced 1,000 times over. My hand moved to the gas valve wheel. Turning it slightly, I felt the resistance of the mechanism, smooth brass threads worn by years of use. I gave it a gentle quarter turn until I detected the first soft hiss of gas. Then another small turn, and the hiss deepened into a steady whisper. I lifted my lantern's torch to the lamp's burner, holding the flame close to the inlet. There was a moment of silence, as though the lamp held its breath. Then, with that familiar whoosh, a slender blue torch flame ignited at the burner's base. The new wick caught immediately, unfurling a column of pale gold light that climbed inside the chimney. Warmth unfurled in my chest as the flame steadied. Its glow washed over the damp stones in a perfect circle, a small domain of light amid the darkness. I lowered my torch and took a step back, reaching out to test the lamppost's warmth, gentle heat that assured me the gas was flowing just so, neither too fiercely nor too sparingly. I closed the valve wheel with a minute backward turn, cutting off the excess hiss until only a quiet, even flame remained. The lamp seemed content, its light unwavering as if relieved of its earlier distress. I replaced the trimmed wick and chimney with care, seating the glass so it would seal against drafts and protect the flame from further gusts. The metal cap clicked into place and I ran a gloved finger around its edge to confirm tightness. Beneath my touch, the lamp post vibrated faintly, alive with warmth and light. I straightened, brushing soot from my hands against my trousers, and packed my scissors back into their leather sheath. For a long moment I simply watched the lamp, letting the hush settle over me once more. Across the riverbank, other lamps glowed steadily. In the quiet, the city seemed to hold its breath. The endless tide of night paused in reverent silence around this small achievement. Even the Thames appeared calmer here, the water reflecting each lamp in slender vertical lines of gold and amber. My ladder, once more unneeded, rested lightly against the post. I grasped its side and nudged it free, letting it thud softly onto the cobbles. Then, adjusting the straps of my canvas apron, I lifted my lantern and moved on. Lamp by lamp, this was how the night advanced. One sputter tamed, one flame restored, each light a guardian against the dark. As I turned toward the next corner, I found the satisfaction of a steady flame warming my thoughts. Troubleshooting this lamp had been a gentle reminder of why I embraced this work. The patient choreography of tools, the delicate chemistry of gas and wick, the quiet triumph of light over shadow. Ahead lay a narrow alley where a watchman kept his vigil. I could almost hear his soft tread and the low rasp of his own lantern. Together, we would share this silent highway of lamplight, each fulfilling our small roles in the city's nightly ritual. With a final glance back at the lamp I had mended, I nodded in its direction as if greeting an old friend. Its glow would remain, steady and unwavering, until dawn reclaimed the sky. Then, I lifted my lantern high and continued down the misty path, ready for the next delicate challenge that awaited beneath London's silent stars. A hushed stillness settles between the rows of gas lamps, each one a glowing ember in the far-reaching dark of London's side streets. The lamplighter eases his ladder from the damp cobblestones and props it gently against the cold iron post of the last lamp he has tended. His breath, visible in the chill air, drifts toward the dim halo of light overhead before fading into nothing. The damp scent of night, mixtures of river mist, soot and lingering coal smoke, hangs heavy behind his ears as he straightens and allows the echo of his boot on stone to die away. For a long moment he stands still, absorbing the hush that follows the lamp's steady flare. From the far end of the alley, a hush of leather boots on stone breaks this solitude. The lamplighter's hand instinctively drifts in the direction of a shadowed figure approaching beneath the weak luminescence. Stepping forward, the newcomer comes into focus. A night watchman wrapped in a greatcoat of midnight blue wool, cap brim tilted low. The watchman's lantern dangles from his belt, unlit, awaiting its own match and spark. He pauses exactly under the lamp's glow, the contours of his stern face softened by the shifting radiance. The lamplighter raises his lantern high, as if greeting an old friend. A small, respectful nod passes between the two. Neither hurries, neither speaks without need. In the lull, the gentle hiss from the lamplighter's just-lit gas lamp and the distant drip of water from a nearby drain pipe are the only sounds to disturb the calm. "Good evening, friend." The watchman's voice emerges, low and measured, as if conserving every syllable for maximum weight. He tugs at his collar, though the wool is a comfort against the creeping cold. "Evening, sir." The lamplighter inclines his head in return. "A bracing night, is it not?" "Aye," the watchman agrees, lifting one gauntlet hand to brush the brim of his cap. "Wind off the Thames carried a bite this hour past. But the lamps you've set, well, they cut it cleanly. Bright as hope." A quiet smile tugs at the lamplighter's lips. He shifts his oil tin on his belt for better balance, the brass container giving a reassuring weight against his side. "I'm glad they serve you in your rounds," he replies. "And may they ease the way for all who wander these lanes." The watchman glances at his dark lantern, the glass globe still dull. He lowers his voice in a gesture of intimate confidence, as if the walls themselves might be listening. "I promised our sergeant I'd keep the lamps from faltering. Rumor grows of thieves slipping through darker stretches of the city. Your light stands guard as well as any of us." The lamplighter nods gravely, then reaches for his own pack of matches. With deliberate care, he extracts one long-stemmed match, the phosphorus tip glowing faintly against his leather glove. Leaning close, he touches the match's head to the watchman's lantern wick. A small flare of orange flickers inside the glass chamber. The watchman's lantern flares to life, sputters for a heartbeat, then settles into a steady, bright glow. The two lights, one from the gas lamp overhead, one from the watchman's portable lantern, merge in a soft embrace of warmth. "Thank you kindly," the watchman murmurs, his breath now clear of the immediate cold. He taps a gloved finger upon the watch case strapped to his chest. "I'll keep well lit through the bridge and the quays. Mind the puddles by the old warehouse on Stone's Wharf," the lamplighter warns, glancing toward the river's direction. "Rain's pooled there deeper than it looks." "A good warning." The watchman adjusts his lantern strap. "I'll not forget." He pauses, then raises his lantern in salutation, a gesture of kinship between tradesmen of the night. Standing beneath two glowing orbs, they share a moment of silent understanding. Both men perform their duty in the darkness, one to banish the shadows with gaslight, the other to patrol and preserve order. Their roles differ, but the rhythm of their footsteps and the steadiness of their lights pulse with the same purpose. The lamplighter breaks the quiet first. "I'll take my leave now," he says softly, stepping back toward the ladder he has tucked aside. "Safe watch to you, sir." "And you," replies the watchman. "May your path hold no stray gusts to snuff out your lamps. I'll see you at the break of dawn when it's time to extinguish." "Aye," says the lamplighter as he settles the match pack back into his pocket. "Until then, good night." He offers a final nod of camaraderie and turns away, lantern held high, boots crunching gently on the uneven stones. The watchman stands a moment longer beneath the lamp. The circle of light around him grows intimate, as if a small sanctuary against the vast darkness beyond. Then, with measured steps, he advances deeper into the alley, his lantern bobbing and marking the path like a tiny, faithful star. Left alone once more, the lamplighter surveys the quiet street. The shared glow of two lights, his own gas flame above and the watchman's lantern now receding, feels like a promise that the city's breath will not be solely its own this night. There is comfort in this unspoken accord, in the knowledge that each flame kindled and each patrol march brings safeguard to drifting souls and slumbering homes. He retrieves his ladder, lifts it with careful precision, and carries it toward the next post on his list. The soft scrape of iron on stone provides a new note in the nocturne. He arranges his tools as he walks, the trimming shears at his side, the oil can carried low for balance, the lantern bobbing gently to keep the cobbles in view. Ahead, the thoroughfare opens into a wider lane, where the lamps stand farther apart and the shadows deepen between them. Still, the lamplighter proceeds with unwavering calm, each step measured, each motion deliberate. He feels the rhythm of the city's heart in the hiss of gas, in the distant roll of carriage wheels, in the subdued laughter of a late supper behind shuttered windows. And in that rhythm he finds purpose. The low murmur of a watchman's greeting and the shared spark of a match remind him that these nightly rituals connect him to others, even in the hush of this dim-lit alley. Each exchange of light is a token of fellowship in London's tapestry of night work, unseen, unsung, but vital. He pauses once more at the lane's entrance, glancing backward at the soft glow marking the alley's mouth. Then he turns his face forward, to the darker stretch where he will place the next lamp aloft, where he will coax another gentle flare to pierce the velvet gloom. Foot by foot, flame by flame, he continues on, assured that somewhere behind him and ahead, watchful eyes and steadfast lights hold the city's shadows at bay. The hush of the night returns, deeper now but no less sacred, while the lamplighter with lantern and ladder, steps quietly into the waiting darkness, guided by the twin lanterns of comradeship and obligation. He lifts his lantern higher, its warm glow spilling across the cobblestones as he turns from the narrow alley where the watchman's soft farewell still lingers in the air. The hush of the city at this hour feels sacred, as though every footfall and distant echo drifts in a vast cathedral where only the lamps and the river bear witness. He passes beneath an iron arch that frames the riverbank, and in that moment the tangled streets melt away. Before him stretches the Thames, its dark surface rippling in gentle eddies. The lamps he has lit thus far stand sentinel along the embankment, each one a small orb of amber light mirrored 100-fold in the water below. The air here carries a faint salt tang, mingled with the softer aroma of camphine oil still clinging to his clothes and skin. He pauses, setting down his ladder against the low stone wall. Carefully he lays a leather-wrapped oil can on the ground, its brass fittings cool to the touch. From the quiet of the embankment he can hear the cathedral bells tolling somewhere upriver, a slow, sonorous toll that marks the passing of another hour. He listens as the mellow tones stretch across the water, imagining their sound waves rolling beneath the lamplit arches of distant bridges. Each note seems to release a memory of nights past, the hiss of a newly ignited lamp, the clink of metal tools hanging at his belt, the soft rhythm of his own heart in time with the city's pulse. He moves closer to the river's edge, boots sinking slightly into a patch of damp sand that has washed up against the wall. He bends and places his hand on the grains, letting them sift slowly between his fingers. In that simple gesture he traces footprints left by others who have come this way before, laborers walking home after long hours at the docks, boatmen delivering coal upriver, lovers strolling under the same lamps that now guide his path. The marks are faint and overlapping, but they speak of continuity, of hands like his that have shouldered ladders and carried oil cans through these very streets, century upon century. He presses a finger into the sand and rolls it thoughtfully, then straightens and gently pats the side rail of his wooden ladder. The rail is worn smooth by countless uprisings and descents. Tiny grooves and ridges tell a story of hands that gripped it in haste or fatigue, in wind or rain or biting winter frost. He traces one particularly deep indentation as if reading a script written in wood. The scent of waxed canvas from his apron drifts upward when he leans close, reminding him of the meticulous care required each night, trimming wicks to an even length, polishing the glass chimneys until they shine like crystal, adjusting valves to coax a steady flame. All these tasks, repeated in a precise choreography, connect him to a line of lamplighters whose diligence preserved safety, warmth, and the comforting order of light against the encroaching dark. Above him, a lone star pierces the sky, a single bright point over the water. He tilts his head, following its faint reflection wavering below. The river seems alive with its own gentle breath, as though it inhales and exhales beneath the shimmer of gaslight. Soft waves lap at the embankment wall, a rhythmic murmur that harmonizes with the distant clang of a fallen buoy, the echoing clip-clop of a solitary carriage on a far-off street, and the steady reverberation of those cathedral bells. Each sound is distinct yet woven into a seamless tapestry of the night. He steps back from the water and hefts his oil can. In the lantern's glow he can see droplets of condensation beating on its polished surface. He uncaps it and holds it nearer, watching the oil catch the light. The amber liquid seems to glow from within, a silent promise that keeps the lamps alive until dawn's earliest gray. He inhales its faint vapors, the heady mix of petroleum warmth and subtle floral essences added during the midday blending of oils, and feels an inexplicable calm settle in his chest. Here at the river's edge, his duties feel less like chores and more like rites in a timeless ceremony. He replaces the cap with a gentle click and returns the can to its place beside the ladder. Then he resumes his slow walk along the embankment, pausing at each lamp post to allow its halo of light to cast long shadows across the wet stones. He brushes his hand against the post's wrought iron base, feeling the cool texture under his fingertips. Where one lamp stands higher on an elevated platform, he rests his palm on its column and closes his eyes, imagining the first sparks kindled by the earliest lamplighters of this city. He honors them in silence, picturing them tending to their torches long before gaslight, when the world was darker, the nights more formidable. A light breeze rustles through a row of sycamore leaves overhead. The lamplighter lifts his head to watch their shadows dance against the glowing glass. Each lamp seems to breathe in and out with the river's flow, brightening slightly as the current surges, dimming as it ebbs. He finds a hollowed stone seat built into the embankment wall and lowers himself to sit. His ladder leans nearby, the oil can and worn tools arrayed at his feet. From this vantage he can see the entire arc of his path, lamps stretching upriver in a gentle curve, their reflections like golden spears pointing toward the distant shore. He takes a moment to unfasten his leather gloves, stretching his fingers and appreciating the slight roughness of his calloused palms. Each crease in his skin corresponds to a night spent guiding flame to darkness, to the subtle mastery of fire's temperament. He flexes his wrists, reminding himself of the simple perfection found in routine, the drip of oil, the hiss of gas, the soft whoosh as the flame blossoms into life. Those moments are fleeting, yet each one brings a sense of completion, a whisper of reassurance that the city slumbers more safely under his watch. In the deep hush, he hears distant life stirring. A howling foghorn moans from a boat anchored further downriver. Somewhere beyond the lamps, a dog barks and a child's half-sleep murmur drifts out a window. These sounds, set against the backdrop of river and bells, make him feel small and yet profoundly connected. He rises, rolling his shoulders to ease a brief ache, and retrieves his ladder. He brushes off a few grains of sand from one rung, then replaces the ladder vertically against the embankment wall. The worn wood feels familiar, comfortable, as though it, too, is an old companion in this nightly rite. Before he moves on, he turns once more to gaze upriver. The lamps ahead resemble pearls strung along a dark ribbon of water. Their glow seems to beckon him forward, inviting him to continue the ritual that began at twilight and will not end until dawn. He reaches out and reverently touches the nearest lamp's glass chimney, as if offering thanks for its steadfast light. It glimmers in response, and for a heartbeat the world feels utterly still. Then, with slow and deliberate steps, he resumes his journey. The ladder and oil can return to his shoulder, the leather apron settling comfortably around his hips once more. Each lamp he approaches will be tended with the same care he has shown here, by the riverside, where reflection and reverie met beneath the cathedral bells and lapping tide. As he walks on, the gentle hymn of water and wind accompanies him, leading him toward the next lamp post, and the next moment in the timeless dance of light and night. Late one autumn night, when London's winding streets lay veiled beneath a drifting silver-gray mist, the lamplighter found himself enveloped in a hush so complete it seemed to absorb every footfall. The fog crept along the cobbles in slow, slumberous waves, each exhalation from the river rising into ghostly plumes that shivered in the faint glow of distant lamps. He paused for a moment, his breath curling before him like a fleeting memory, and allowed himself to be still. In that stillness, the city's usual rumbles, carriage wheels, dockworkers' shouts, the tolling of church bells, retreated into a distant lullaby, leaving the hush both weighty and welcome. He tightened the strap of his waxed canvas apron, feeling the brass buckles cool against his chest. The leather oil tins hanging at his side carried a comforting weight. Each bore the scent of camphene and turpentine, mingling with the faint perfume of damp earth and wood smoke. With each step, droplets of fog settled on his shoulders, tiny beads that gleamed like dew in the lamplight and then vanished. He lifted a hand to brush them free, mindful of the slow, deliberate rhythm of his journey. This was not merely a task to finish, but a meditation carried out in measured motions. Ahead, the nearest lamp post emerged from the swirling mist, its flame blurred into a soft, golden halo. He approached quietly, feeling the ground soften beneath his boots where the fog lay thickest. The ladder's wooden rails felt spongy with moisture at his touch, and he tested its stability with a gentle tap before leaning it against the iron post. Up the rungs he climbed, each footfall cushioned by the damp air, and reached the burner collar with practiced care. The chimney glass was chilled to the touch, its surface dotted with condensation that mirrored the small, wavering brilliance within. With a soft click, he opened the reservoir valve and watched as the blended oil glided in, dark and viscous, coating the inner walls of the lamp. Even here, high above the street, the fog pressed in, muffling sounds so completely that the faint hiss of gas when he lit the wick seemed almost too loud. Yet in that hiss lay reassurance. It signaled not only that the flame had caught, but that the age-old ritual continued unbroken. He eased the match away and allowed the flame to settle, its bright heart pushing back the mist in a gentle bloom of light. Small rivulets of condensation ran down the glass chimney, and for a moment the halo of refracted glow seemed to pulse as if breathing. Descending the ladder, the lamplighter lingered under the halo, watching how the light softened the mist into drifting veils around a single axis of warmth. He closed his eyes briefly, savoring the sensation of calm that settled in his chest. Time stretched between beats of his heart, and in that stretch he felt the presence of countless predecessors who had stood here, performing the same choreography, adjusting wicks, balancing ladders, coaxing gas into flame. Their ghostly echoes were carried on the fog, a quiet chorus of dedication and continuity. He moved on, each lamp now a beacon in the vaporous hush, each halo a small, glowing portal that guided him through the night. The mist sharpened his senses. The soft click of every gas valve, the gentle scrape of his ladder rungs shifting, the distant, muted toll of the cathedral clock. Even the faintest creak of an iron gate or the rustle of a hidden cat on a windowsill felt magnified, woven into the tapestry of sound that accompanied his solitary pilgrimage. The street sloped upward to a narrow alley, where the fog lay thickest, clinging to walls and lurking in corners. He paused to inhale the cold, mist-laden air, tasting the brine of the Thames that drifted inland. In the cavernous hush, his own breath sounded like a half-forgotten word. The oil cans at his side felt suddenly heavier with purpose, as though the invisible weight of the night pressed upon their brass lids. Guiding the ladder into position, he placed a hand against the slick iron post for support, then climbed once more to release another ring of lamplight into the gloom. Below, the cobblestones shimmered with reflected halos, each overlapping pool of light creating gentle gradients from gold to gray to shadow. He gazed down upon the patterned paving, his boots making faint impressions in the mist, and recognized a quiet beauty in this shifting scene. It felt akin to painting with light and atmosphere, every lamp a brushstroke on the foggy canvas, every puddle stealing and scattering radiance in its own small pool. He took his time, polishing the chimney's exterior glass until the halo steadied, then stepped back to observe the interplay of glow and gloom. A drop of water slid from the chimney rim onto the ground with a soft plink, and he smiled at the simplicity of it, one small bead, one small sound anchoring him in the present. As he straightened the ladder, he looked up at the sky, where the moon lay hidden behind thick clouds, its pale glow diffused into the night's ambient light. He felt neither rush nor fatigue, only an unhurried awareness that each lamp he restored was a promise of comfort and safety for the city's few nighttime wanderers. Passing on, he reflected on the day's earlier labors, the damp morning in the lamp house, the hours spent polishing and preparing, the careful shaping of cotton wicks in the bright noon sun. All of that had led him here, beneath this misty canopy, to this sequence of small yet sacred tasks. In each measured motion, unscrewing the burner cap, seating the wick, filling the reservoir, he found a thread weaving him to generations of lamplighters who had performed the same rites. The ritual itself became a bridge across time, linking him to craftsmen whose stories he would never know but whose hands had performed identical gestures to kindle the same soft lights. The fog thickened once more as he approached what would be the final lamp of this stage of the round. He moved more deliberately now, savoring each step, each inhalation of the mist that tasted cool and clean on his tongue. His lantern's beam cut a narrow path ahead, but beyond it the world remained a gauzy blur. He halted beneath the lamp post, feeling the hush deepen as though the night itself held its breath. He set down his oil can, ran his gloved hand along the ladder's side, then climbed until his head was level with the glowing globe encased above. Steadying the dripping chimney with his left hand, he pried off the burner cap with his right and poured libations of golden oil. A single spark from the flint sent flame wending through the gas, illuminating the droplets clinging to the glass in a dazzling, ephemeral constellation. He closed his eyes again, letting the soft warmth wash over his face, and whispered a silent greeting to the lamp. In that moment, it was more than a simple fixture, it was a lantern of memory bearing witness to countless nights like this one. Climbing down, he retrieved his ladder and paused in the middle of the street, taking in the scene he had shaped. A procession of gently glowing lamps advancing down the misty avenue, each halo marking a milestone of light in the engulfing night. He felt a quiet pride tempered by reverence at the continuity of this ritual, the way one man carrying little more than an oil can ladder and heart full of purpose, could stitch together the darkness and grant the city a sense of warmth and orientation. With the last lamp of this section lit, he slung the ladder over his shoulder and resumed his slow winding progression into deeper fog. Ahead lay distant hills crowned with even more lamps, awaiting his arrival. But for now he moved in the liminal space between waking and slumber, where the boundaries of reality blurred like the edges of his own thoughts. Each footstep, each breath, each murmured hiss of gas became an act of quiet devotion to a craft as old as the city itself. Thus ended the chapter of late-night fog and flickering halos, a gentle interlude on his nightly round, marking the city's transition from one realm of shadow into another suffused with golden grace. In the hush, he carried forward the promise of light, guided by memory, ritual, and the unwavering rhythm of the lamplighter's art. The slope rose before him, a gentle incline at first that gradually steepened, turning cobblestones into uneven steps he had to navigate with care. The lantern at his side cast long, wavering shadows that danced against the rough stone walls of the narrow lane. Each footfall sounded muffled as though the hill itself absorbed his steps, reluctant to give way. He shifted the ladder's weight from one shoulder to the other, feeling the canvas apron strain against his back, the tins of oil clinking softly at his waist. Damp evening air pressed against his cheeks, carrying whispers of far-off church bells and the faint metallic tang of gas. He paused halfway up the rise, bracing one hand against the cool wall. Beads of perspiration gathered along his hairline, despite the growing chill. His breath formed small clouds in the lamplit gloom, and he let them drift away before he resumed the climb. The ladder, 6 sturdy rungs of seasoned wood, felt heavier than at any point earlier in the night. Perhaps it was the cumulative miles of pavement behind him, or the solitude pressing in from either side. Yet each creak and groan of the ladder as he lifted it higher felt intimate, an old friend bearing the weight of his trust. At the crest of the hill lay the last 3 lamp posts, silent sentinels that had stood unlit while the rest of the city glowed below. He set the ladder's feet on 2 uneven cobbles, ensuring stability against the slope. Then with gloved hands he checked the cradle at the top of the post, a metal bracket holding the reservoir and glass chimney. He could just make out its dark form against the night sky, haloed faintly by the distant lights of St. Mary's spire. Above him, the wind whispered through rooftops, stirring old slate and rattling chimney pots. He listened, measuring the gusts before hoisting himself upward. Climbing was a ritual in itself. 1 foot on each rung, hands gripping the sides, careful not to knock the asbestos wicking free. When he reached the top, he leaned in close. The chamber was cool, empty of flame. He opened the brass cap on the reservoir, the metal cool against his glove. A low hiss greeted him as the residual gas escaped in a tiny plume, vanishing into the night. He wiped the wick seat with a scrap of cloth, clearing soot and residue from prior evenings. Then, with a practiced motion, he filled the chamber with the blended camphene and kerosene oil, watching the liquid shimmer in the flicker of his lantern. The scent rose at once, a mixture of sweet camphor and sharper petroleum, comforting reminders of hours spent in the lamp house. Retrieving a fresh, precisely cut wick from his apron pocket, he fitted it into place, twisting gently until it felt snug and even. He drew back for a moment's pause, chest rising and falling as he admired the rhythm of his own breathing. Below, in a ribbon of softly glowing posts, he recognized patterns he had long memorized. A curve at the next turn, a faint glimmer where the street narrowed. Each lamp was a bookmark in the city's unfolding story. But this one, perched at the summit, marked the boundary between his world and the shifting dawn that would soon chase him home. He struck a match, the sulfur tip flaring bright and sudden against the darkness. Leaning forward, he lowered the flame to the lamp's small aperture. A brief, breathless hush passed, the moment before ignition, then the gentle whoosh as gas met fire. The wick leapt to life, flame licking the inside of the chimney until it settled into a steady, calm glow. He watched the flame's reflection ripple along the glass, then stepped back to wipe away a spot of soot on the exterior. Under this light, the world seemed to hold its breath. The hill flattened into a quiet expanse, the trees on either side etched in silhouette. Looking down, he saw the real magic unfold. One by one, the lamps behind him looked almost like companions, as though sensing his final approach. Their lantern glow glowed warm and expectant. Their light pooled on the cobbles, highlighting patches of moss and the occasional scar where a cartwheel had carved grooves. He imagined the people tucked away in rooms lit by these very flames, milliners finishing hats in a garret, a watchman doing his rounds under desk lamps, a seamstress mending a hem by lamplight. Each lamp was a small hearth, a promise of security against the dark. He let the moment stretch. The wind carried a faint creak from the ladder, reminding him of its presence. He ran a cautious finger along the wood grain, smooth in places, rough where age and use had taken their toll. A flash of memory returned. Himself, younger, struggling to hoist the same ladder on his very first night, uncertain if his arms could bear the weight. Now his hands fit the rungs instinctively. He felt pride in that memory, pride in every lit lamp glowing behind him, the culmination of each precise cut of wick, every ounce of blended oil, every soot-brushed pane of glass. But there was still work to do. 2 lamps remained at his feet, each on lower posts but requiring the same exacting care. He slid down the ladder, careful not to jolt the rungs, and repositioned it against the next post. His lantern light trembled briefly, though the lamp itself stood firm. With deliberate calm, he repeated the familiar dance, opening the reservoir cap, topping it with oil, seating the wick, igniting the gas. The hiss sounded like a sigh of relief. The lamp awakened, unhindered by blockages. He straightened, brushing soot from his apron, and pivoted to the final post. The last lamp rested at the edge of the hillside, where the path began to level. He placed the ladder carefully between 2 stones, testing its balance before each ascent. Here, the wind gusted stronger, carrying whispers of carriages on distant streets and the faint cry of a night bird. He climbed, heart steady, until he stood above the lantern cradle. Oil, wick, flame, every step of the ritual felt as alive as the night itself. When the final whoosh rang out, it felt like a benediction, sealing his journey with warmth and certainty. He climbed down one last time, ladder in hand, and turned to survey his handiwork. Before him lay a line of lampposts stretching into the sleeping city, each halo of light a soft beacon against the night. The glow warmed his cheeks and brought a hint of color to the dusky sky. He sensed the approach of dawn somewhere beyond the roofs, yet for now the lamps held the darkness at bay. He breathed deeply of the cool air, the scent of oil and stone blending in his lungs. At the bottom of the hill, he paused to set the ladder against the wall. With gentle thumbs, he secured its strap, ensuring it would not slip when he returned in the early hours to extinguish the flames. The lamp house awaited, along with the final tasks of cleaning chimneys and draining reservoirs. But for this moment he simply stood, a solitary figure in the quiet square, surrounded by the soft chorus of lamplight. The city lay before him, a tapestry of glowing threads woven into the night. And having lit the final lamps on the distant hill, he felt a profound satisfaction, a silent acknowledgement that until the dawn broke, he would be the unseen guardian of London's nocturnal heartbeat. The eastern sky, once inked in midnight blue, now smears itself with pale mauve and pearly gray as the first brushstrokes of dawn make their gentle approach. The lamplighter pauses at the crest of the cobbled rise where the final lamp of last night's round still glows. A hush settles like a shawl around him, though the city has begun to stir. Faint chirps of sparrows flit through the air, and somewhere down by the riverbank a solitary gull calls. He inhales the cool, sweet air, scented by dew-wet grass and the lingering tinge of camphine oil on his fingers. The lamp's light feels both intimate and almost intrusive in the gathering day, as though a private secret held only too briefly before daylight claims it. He steadies himself against the ladder's worn rung, running a hand over its smooth, dark wood. Each rung bears the faint imprint of gloves past, an echo of his own night-long footsteps. The canvas apron stretched across his chest carries the last drops of oil and soot from midnight's labor, remnants he will soon carry back to the lamp house for cleaning. But first there is duty yet unfinished, the extinguishing ritual. Carefully he lifts the ladder against the iron post, the base settling on moistened stones. A soft thud reverberates up his arms. He pauses, listening to the distant toll of a cathedral bell, counting its sonorous heartbeat as 3, 4, 5. Each peal seems to mark time with his own breath. Climbing deliberately, rung by rung, he ascends toward the glass chimney that still holds flame. The world around shifts, shadows retreat into corners, and the pale violet sky blooms toward gold at the horizon. From above, the city's outline softens into gentle shapes. A smokestack here, the silhouette of a turret there. Below, narrow alleys remain draped in half-light, though soon the gaslight will vanish and the sun will rule in its place. At the top of the ladder, he stands before the small brass valve, its surface catching the nascent sunlight. Fingers cold but steady, he wraps his glove around the wheel. A half-turn and he feels the valve begin to yield. But tradition demands he listens. Turning slowly, he tightens until there is a final, delicate click. Almost at once comes the faintest pop, and the flame inside the chimney flutters, then sighs out. He holds his breath for a moment as though hoping the glow will linger, but the lamp does not resist. Darkness, once held aloft by gas and wick, surrenders quietly to dawn. Only the sky's own light now dances across the cooled glass, illuminating every streak of smoke and mote of soot from the night's vigil. He lowers the ladder tip first, minding the polished stone. At the base, it thuds once more, this time more gently, as though finally exhaling after its long climb. The lamplighter kneels, running a cloth over the chimney's sooty surface, pushing away the residue that clings like memory. He pauses, brushing his fingertips across the glass as though to erase the imprint of flame. It is a ritual of leaving behind, of making space for the new day. With one final stroke, he lifts the chimney off its brass collar and places it in a small canvas bag he carries for empty chimneys. Each one will later be washed and polished back at the lamp house. He straightens and retrieves his pole, the long, slender brass rod he uses to extinguish lamps beyond the reach of ladders. From the hilltop's lamp, he can see 2 more lamps down the winding lane, their flames blinking in the soft dawn gloom. He steps lightly across cobblestones scored by carriage wheels and foot traffic. The stones underfoot still glisten with dew, reflecting the faint glow of the few remaining lamps further on. Even a single lamp holds a warmth, An amber lantern hung in an open window, a solitary beacon for anyone still stirring in the deep heart of night. Reaching the next lamp, he leans the pole's hooked end beneath the burner cap. A gentle twist and the valve closes as before, click, pop, darkness. He waits for a heartbeat, listening to the creak of wood in the nearby townhouse and the distant murmur of fishwives arriving at Billingsgate Market. In that sudden hush, the empty air feels alive, full of anticipation for what dawn might bring. The hammering of shop doors, the ring of a wheelbarrow, the hush of boots through puddles. One by one he moves along, each extinguishing executed with the same measured attention. He treats the first lamp of the row much as he did the last, a solemn farewell to the night. His progress is neither hurried nor slow, but carried by a steady rhythm. Lift ladder, climb, turn valve, here pop, descend, clean chimney, move on. There is something comforting, even meditative, in the repetition. A single lamp, then two, then three, until there are only distant flickers scattered across the rising day, like fireflies fleeing the sun. By the time he reaches the river crossing, the sky has bloomed to a pale, translucent blue. The bridge's gas lamps, standing sentinel over the Thames, are nearly all dark. The few that remain cast feeble halos on the water's surface, where ripples chase the morning breeze. He rests his hand on the wrought iron railing for a moment, lifting the chimney of one final lamp to the sky. Closing the valve, the flame disappears into nothingness, and London's broad riverbank stands bare of lamplight, awaiting the day's natural illumination. The only sound is the gentle slap of water against stone piers and a passing boat's quiet churn. Turning from the railing, he tucks the pole beneath his arm and begins the descent toward the lamp house. His steps are lighter now, as though unburdened by the night's responsibility. The canvas bag at his side carries a dozen chimneys. His apron, once slick with oil, bears only a few faint smudges. The world around him has transformed from the secret realm of gaslight into an open stage of awakening trade and commerce. Shop windows begin to unfurl, and the shutters of homes clatter open to reveal hearths preparing for morning tea. A few beams of sunlight break over the rooftops, splitting in shards across the cobbles. As he draws near the lamp house door, he hears the first calls of town criers, hawking the day's news, and the clang of a distant blacksmith. The great wooden door looms before him, its surface pale in the dawn. He reaches for the iron ring, its weight familiar against his glove, and gives it a single gentle pull. The door swings inward with a low creak, the same resonance that greeted him at the beginning of this night. He steps inside, closing the door behind him with a soft thud that echoes in the empty workshop. Inside, the smell of damp canvas and spent oil greets him like an old friend. Rows of extinguished lamps stand silent on their wrought iron pegs, glass chimneys gleaming faintly in the ambient dawn light that filters through the small window. He sets down his ladder and pole, and for a moment simply stands amid the aftermath of his nocturnal journey. Each lamp, though now dark, seems to whisper of the night just past, of hissing flames, of shadows chased back by gentle light, of the countless silent oaths kept while London slept. He lays aside his soot-stained apron and hangs it on the peg alongside the burnt rags from last night's chimney cleans. The canvas bag clinks softly as he empties each chimney into a wooden crate, ready for the hot water bath that will wash away every trace of soot. The space feels calm and expectant, as though the lamp house itself is sighing in relief. Outside, the city rumbles awake, and soon the workshop will fill with activity once more, oil barrels to be topped up, wicks to be cut, ladders to be brushed. But for this fleeting moment he remains still. In the soft light of dawn, the lamplighter closes his eyes and inhales the mingled scents of oil, metal, and canvas. He allows himself a quiet smile, a private acknowledgement of a night's worth of work carried out under stars and gaslight. Then, reaching for the heavy brass key, he turns back toward the door. One final glance at the rows of lamps waiting patiently for twilight's return, and he steps out into the fresh sweetness of morning, the door locking behind him with a gentle click. Thus ends the extinguishing ritual, and with it the night's chapter. Ahead lies the ritual of cleaning and the brief, solitary reverie before the day's labors resume. But for now, in the hush of dawn's first light, the lamplighter stands content, knowing that as the city wakes, its heart will miss the flicker of lamps, and will miss, perhaps, the quiet pulse of ritual that kept the darkness at bay. The lamp house stands hushed in the pale light of early dawn, its heavy door swinging closed with a soft click behind the lamplighter. The night's work is done, and only the faint echo of his footsteps lingers among the long rows of metal posts and battered tools. A solitary window admits the first blush of morning, and the great workshop feels like a ship's hold at anchor, quiet and expectant. In the dim interior, every object seems to sigh with relief. The ladders, once hauled up rickety streets and stooped under damp fog. The oil tins emptied to their last precious drop. The lanterns, their glass chimneys darkened by soot and time. Here, at the close of another night, the lamplighter prepares the silent ritual of cleaning and draining, a gentle ceremony that readies each instrument to shine again when dusk returns. He moves along the long workbench, his waxed canvas apron still strapped around his waist, its brass buckles glinting faintly. In Chapter 18 he climbed the final lamps as dawn's first rays sliced the night sky, twisting gas valves closed until each flame surrendered with a soft pop, then lowering ladders with a measured thud. Now he faces the aftermath. A dozen or more chimneys, their once translucent glass clouds of black, and the spent oil that lingers at the bottom of each reservoir. His leather boots scuff lightly against the wooden floorboards as he gathers the first chimney, slipping it from its wrought iron hook. He cradles the sooty cylinder in gloved hands, feeling its cool surface through the thin cotton of his gloves. The glass is stubborn with residue, but the lamplighter approaches the task with a calm patience born of repetition. At a nearby sink, warmed by the boiler in a corner, he fills 2 basins with water heated until steam rises in lazy spirals. Into the first basin goes the chimney, submerged slowly so that bubbles escape from every crevice. The hot water loosens tarry deposits, and the lamplighter watches through the glass as grime peels away in muted clouds. He leans closer, inhaling the faint tang of soot mingled with residual camphene, and exhales a sigh. In these moments, the world beyond the lamp house, busy streets, distant church bells, the creak of carriage wheels, slips away into dream. All that remains is the ritual work of purification. When the chimney has soaked long enough, he lifts it gently and transfers it to the second basin, where a bristled brush awaits. With deliberate strokes he scrubs the inner walls, coaxing every last smear of carbon from the glass. The brush whispers across the surface and small droplets scatter onto the bench. Each stroke carries him farther from the night's urgency, deeper into a meditative rhythm. For every chimney cleansed there is a ripple of satisfaction, a promise that at next dusk the flames will burn clear and bright, untroubled by shadows of smoke. As he attends to the chimneys, a small copper spigot stands ready at the edge of the workbench, its tap turned toward a lead-lined bucket. The lamplighter retrieves one of the emptied oil tins, its sides crushed inward by the careful pouring of the previous shift. He carries it to the spigot, tilting the can beneath the nozzle, and priming the small valve with a gentle twist. From the spigot flows a dark, viscous stream of leftover oil, camphene blended with scented additives, tested at midday in Chapter 4 and balanced for a slow, steady burn. Each drop returns to the storage barrel below, ready to be refined anew when blending resumes in the afternoon light. The lamplighter watches the oil swirl into the great barrel, listening to the muted thump of liquid against wood. In that sound he hears the heartbeat of the workshop, a measured pulse that will guide the next cycle of labor. He proceeds down the line: chimney immersion, glass scrubbing, oil draining. The tools: scissors for trimming wicks, a wire brush for rungs, small screwdrivers for tightening burner caps, are laid out methodically on a pegboard above the bench. With an oiled rag in hand, the lamplighter begins wiping each implement, removing traces of soot and oil. His movements are slow and precise: a circular pass over the metal blade of the wick scissors, a gentle rub along the ladder's step, a careful run of fabric over the brass fittings. Each tool gleams faintly in the early light, a reflection of the lamplighter's dedication to order and care. Between chores he pauses to reflect. In Chapter 17 he climbs steep inclines to reach the final lamps atop distant hills, gazing back at a ribbon of lampposts glowing like fireflies against the night. In Chapter 16 he walked through drifting fog, each haloed flame transformed into a dreamscape. Now, in the quiet glow of dawn, he contemplates the cycle: preparation, ignition, maintenance, extinguishing, cleaning. It is a rite as old as the city's reliance on gaslight itself, a choreography of hands and flame that transforms London's darkness into reassuring warmth. A final sweep along the bench ensures that every chimney rests on its designated hook, every lantern sits empty but spotless, Every can resides in its leather holster. The bucket of water, murky with soot, is emptied into the drain outside. The rag is hung to dry, scented faintly with oil and smoke. The lamplighter steps back, his breath steady, and surveys the room as though it were a gallery of his own making. Tools lie in perfect array, benches are cleared, and even the laboratory of paraphernalia, measuring cylinders, copper vats, small journals of recorded notes, seem to fold in upon themselves, ready for the day's bright bustle. As the sun lifts higher, the lamp house will fill with the bustle of workers arriving, the brewer returning barrels of scent, the clerical assistant noting tonight's routes, the apprentice lugging fresh cotton for wicks. But for this moment, it is a sanctuary of stillness. The lamplighter removes his apron, tucking it carefully into a drawer. He gathers his evening coat, stiff from weeks of outdoor service, and hangs it on a peg near the door. With a final, satisfied glance at the empty benches and polished glass chimneys, he steps outside. The morning air greets him with a chorus of bird calls and the distant rumble of carts on cobbles. Dawn's light spills across the quiet street, and the last lamps, once extinguished in Chapter 18, flicker briefly in memory before they fade like embers swallowed by daylight. The lamplighter inhales deeply, savoring the contrast between his solitary vigil and the awakening city. He closes the door with a careful turn of the key, locks the lamp house and pauses at the threshold. In the hush, he whispers his silent thanks, to the tools he tended, to the chimneys that will shine again, and to the unseen audience of lampposts standing sentinel until this quiet ritual begins once more. The night's labors are over, and the world beyond the lamp house door remains hushed, poised between the retreating shadows of dawn and the first soft glimmers of morning light. He pauses at the threshold, one calloused hand resting against the rough-hewn wood, the other still clutching his worn oil tin. After hours of climbing ladders and coaxing flickering flames to steady glow, he stands silent and unmoving, breathing deeply of the cool, damp air. It carries the faint scent of peat smoke from distant hearths, the briny tang of the Thames a few streets away, and the tender promise of new day on its wings. This single moment, framed by the tall narrow arch of the door, feels like the still center of a turning world. Outside, the ragged outlines of rooftops and chimneys have sharpened in the growing light. One by one, swallows flit through the pale sky, bound on early hunts. The lamplighter's gaze drifts upward, tracing the arc of his nightly path. Each lamp he lit now stands like a silent sentinel, haloed by the faint blush of dawn. He turns the key in the lock with measured care, relishing the soft click that echoes in the empty corridor behind him. The bolt slides home and he leans with a steadying shoulder against the thick oak. For a moment, he allows himself to feel the weight of the night's work fall away, the ladders stowed in neat rows, the oil cans drained of their final drips, the trimmed wicks bundled and shelved. He exhales softly, a small cloud of breath dissipating into the chill air. The lamp house itself seems to exhale in unison. The lantern on the workbench, long since extinguished, winks its last ember of glow before surrendering to the dawn. The tiled floor underfoot is stained with old oil and soot, but in the morning haze it takes on a muted patina of antiquity, a mosaic recording the rhythm of countless nights. He straightens, smoothing the crease in his canvas apron with a gentle fold. The brass buckles and buttons gleam faintly, touched by the glow of the new sun. At this hour, even the simplest fixtures appear noble, as though imbued with some latent history waiting to be uncovered. He steps outside at last, closing the lamp house door behind him with a measured thud. The sound is muffled by the dew-laden pathway, and for a moment the street seems to hold its breath. He stands alone on the narrow lane, framed by tall brick tenements, each window dark except where a single curtain stirs in an upstairs room. In the distance, the chiming of a church clock marks the hour, soft, sonorous, unhurried. He tucks his lantern under one arm, though its flame is but a pale mimic of yesterday's brilliance. What warmth remains he feels radiate through the glass, like the last echo of a restful dream. With deliberate steps, he paces toward the corner where he first began his round. The lamps he ignited earlier still twinkle in the pre-dawn gloom, their glass domes smeared with spots of soot now rendered almost poetic in the half-light. Each lamp holds a memory of small triumphs, the hiss that steadied to a placid glow, the moment a reluctant wick caught flame, the silent salutation of a watchman at an alley's mouth. He lifts his gaze and allows himself a grateful nod, though none but the lamps themselves perceive it. He murmurs a silent benediction, words halfway between a prayer and a quiet refrain, thanking the unseen audience of iron posts and painted lantern housings for bearing witness once more. The roadway underfoot is slick with early dew. He pauses to watch as a stray droplet clings to the edge of a lamp's glass chimney before sliding away. The curve of its path catches a sliver of gold, a small luminous bead trailing down to join the droplet on the cobblestone. He kneels to observe it more closely, the hardness of his knees against the cold stones a sharp reminder of his labor. Yet in this simple act, witnessing the dance of water and light, he finds a quiet elation. The city may slumber, but it is in these incremental shifts of nature that he senses the pulse of life itself. Rising, he retrieves a soft rag from the front pocket of his apron. With practiced movements, he wipes the glass surface of the nearest lamp, mopping away yesterday's residue and this morning's moisture. The lamp clarifies under his careful ministrations, revealing a perfect prism of cut glass that glints in the growing dawn. He presses his palm against the cool metal base and closes his eyes, feeling for a heartbeat in the silent fixture. It does not beat, of course, yet in its poised stillness he discerns a kind of stoic companionship. His final task lies a few paces ahead, a modest bracket lamp affixed to the corner of a bakery, its forged black iron frame curling in ornamental flourishes. He lifts the lantern in both hands, examining the brass snuffer perched atop its dome. The device is simple, a conical cap on a slender rod, but he regards it as one might a friend, for it has faithfully stifled the last sprawling embers each dawn for seasons uncounted. Gently, he removes the snuffer and places it upon the wooden railing of a low fence. He allows the lamp's flame to flicker one last time, tender and unresisting. Then, with a graceful twist of his wrist, he lowers the snuffer until it envelopes the small pillar of fire. A brief pop marks its passing, and the glare retreats into a pool of smoky amber. He straightens and breathes again, the motion slow and deliberate. All around him, the city stretches, and sleeps, still asleep, held in gentle suspension by the retreating night and the advancing day. He returns the snuffer to its post and steps back. The bracket lamp is cold to the touch now, its glass darkened. He runs a finger along the metal frame, following the pattern of raised vines and blossoms, an echo of bygone artisanship. In the silence, he hears the first low notes of a piano, perhaps an early riser practicing scales in a parlor 2 stories above. The sound filters through an open window, tender and fragile, like a bird's tentative song at dawn. Content that his vigil is complete, he turns his back on the lamp and retraces his steps toward home. With each footfall he carries the memory of the night's choreography, the gentle hiss of ignition, the subtle shift of darkness to light, the dignified stillness that follows each extinguished flame. Though his shift has ended, his work remains etched upon the city itself, a lattice of glowing or fading points marking the passage of hours. He pauses one final time at the crossroads, allowing the symmetry of lampposts on each corner to align in his vision. In that fleeting balance of shadow and illumination, he finds a perfect solace. He tips his hat to the street, a small gesture befitting a craftsman whose audience is made up of lamp posts and empty roads. Then, with the first true rays of sunrise brushing the horizon, he steps into the fold of waking London, vanishing into the gentle stir of a city that, for a few hours each night, learned to breathe by his light. The door of his lodging awaits, but the world he has tenderly tended remains ever poised between dark and light, ready to take its next breath under lantern glow. And as he closes this chapter of solitary reverie before close, he carries with him the quiet certainty that tomorrow and every night thereafter, the lamps will again kindle at his touch, and the night will yield to morning in their tranquil glow.